Chapter 21. The press conference ends. Reporters pressed in around Ethan as the conference drew to a close, shouting questions in rapid succession. Mr. Ethan, why is Emperor Company launching human enhancement loans? Is your plan to introduce a so-called superhuman drug a bid to silence critics of Imperial Company? What comes next for Emperor Company? Will you be developing even more advanced enhancement technologies? They could barely contain themselves. Human enhancement loans was sensational enough, but a Superman pill? Soon anyone might walk around with superpowers of their own. For just $10,000 up front, they'd sign on at the repayment counter without hesitation. One bold reporter fired off another question. Mr. Ethan, aren't you worried that a superhuman drug could wreak havoc? What if criminals get hold of it, robbing banks, attacking strangers? Aren't you risking public safety? Ethan remained composed, offering measured reassurances about security protocols and legal safeguards. Yet just as the journalists leaned forward for his response, another voice cut through the clamor. A single question so sharp it silenced every other reporter in the room. No one knew exactly why it hadn't occurred to them until now, but they all recognized it as the question that really mattered. Ethan stepped up to the podium in the packed conference room, his expression calm. Emperor Corporation's meteoric rise had been flawless, and whispers about its deep-pocketed backers circulated everywhere, yet no one had ever dared to question them directly. Today, an American reporter finally broke the silence. That's an excellent question, Ethan said, offering the reporter a reassuring smile before turning to address the room. Let me clarify what we call Superman's serum. First and foremost, anyone with a criminal record is ineligible to purchase it. We're not distributing it through ordinary pharmacies. It's only available at our Emperor specialty outlets. A skeptical voice from the third row cut in. But it isn't just a harmless prop, right? This substance can literally knock people off their feet if ingested. How can you equate that to something like pepper spray? Ethan nodded. I understand the confusion. Think of Superman's serum as a next-generation non-lethal defense tool, more powerful and yet designed for safety. It incapacitates an assailant without causing lasting harm. Another reporter chimed in, eyebrow raised. Then why would anyone spend $10,000 on it when they could buy ordinary pepper spray for under $20? With all due respect, Ethan replied, if you've ever been threatened at gunpoint, you know that conventional sprays sometimes aren't enough. Superman's serum acts faster, has a wider range, and wears off without permanent side effects. In essence, it's a premium personal security device, an advanced anti-wolf deterrent for the real world. He paused, letting his words sink in. Cameras flashed as he stepped back, leaving the crowd murmuring over this surprising new player in the non-lethal defense market. Ethan drew a slow breath, scanning the anxious faces around him. We all know how things are in America right now. It doesn't matter if you live in the richest neighborhood, the risk is the same for everyone. His words cut short a reporter who was bracing to speak. Officer, Mr. Ethan, you can't seriously expect us to call the police every time, hoping they'll swoop in like Superman. What are we supposed to do then? A trembling bystander took a hesitant step forward, offering his wallet. Sir, please, here's my wallet. Just, please don't take my driver's license or any other important documents. Ethan nodded sympathetically. He understood their fear. When a gun is pointed at you, compliance often seems like the only option. A few journalists tittered, but most in the crowd simply nodded in grim agreement. All right, he said, voice steady, but let's face it, what if things go south? You could get shot. You could run into a violent thug or even a predatory mugger who demands more than just your cash. You swallow your pride, you do what he says, and you pray nothing worse happens. The murmurs died down. Someone dared to speak up. Isn't there another way? Couldn't you, I don't know, knock him out with one punch? Disarm him before he fires? Protect yourself and your money? Ethan reached into his coat pocket and carefully withdrew a small, exquisitely packaged box. Its ebony surface caught the streetlight, and the crowd leaned in as he opened it to reveal a single, sleek vial. This, he announced, holding it aloft, is the answer. We call it the Superman serum. Because if you can't count on a caped hero to save the day, the next best thing is becoming one yourself. I'd call it a form of personal insurance. Ethan pressed the small button on the sleek box. With a quiet click, its lid slid open to reveal a plain black and white capsule. It's simple. Just swallow it, and it takes effect immediately. And when it comes to timing, is it slower to pop a pill than to fish out wolf repellent spray or a stun device from your bag, or even to pull out your wallet? He chuckled, and the assembled reporters erupted into applause. They all valued practical self-defense, and here was a solution that bypassed the medical system altogether. Until anyone uncovered dirt on Emperor Company, they had little choice but to echo Ethan's enthusiasm. Besides, many were genuinely impressed. By evening, Emperor Company dominated the headlines. Major newspapers and TV news programs, sensing a big story, all rushed to highlight the company's latest innovation, an eager pack circling its prize. They assembled panels of leading sociologists, biologists, pharmacologists, and other specialists to examine every facet of Emperor Company's superhuman drug and body enhancement technology. From public health and ethics to geopolitics and criminal misuse, the experts debated its potential benefits and dangers, and as often happens, rival firms seized the spotlight, steering the conversation to suit their own agendas. Still, nothing could slow the medicine's meteoric rise in popularity. At a steady price of $10,000 per dose, it sold like wildfire. So strong was the demand that even local authorities have opened negotiations with Emperor Company, exploring the possibility of covering the police force's superhuman treatments under municipal health insurance. Chapter 22. 2 updates. Starting today. Michelle hurried to keep pace with Ethan as he emerged from the boardroom, her brow furrowed with concern. "Sir, you've been very clear that we only sell Superman medicine to customers without a criminal record. But what happens if, down the road, criminals manage to get their hands on it?" Ethan turned smoothly and offered her an easy smile. "And what exactly does that have to do with us?" Michelle's cheeks warmed. Fresh out of university, she'd never learned the hard lessons of corporate life, how reputations are managed, facts are spun, and responsibility is shifted. "But you told everyone we'd make sure that couldn't happen." He chuckled softly and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart, that was the message, but in the real world, accidents occur. Suppose a customer drops a pill of Superman medicine on the sidewalk. A thief picks it up, figures out what it is, and boom, you've got a criminal with superhuman strength. Or maybe someone gets mugged before they ever even swallow their dose." Ethan watched Michelle's eyes widen as she pictured the scenario. He wasn't scolding her, he was guiding her, opening her mind to the complexities of risk management. "Our job isn't just to set rules," he continued, "it's to anticipate every loophole and to control the story once something inevitably goes wrong." Ethan pressed his temple with a sigh. If his most trusted subordinate didn't even know the basics of the company's security protocols, he was in for a headache. Thankfully, he had his AI assistant, Megatron, at his side. Megatron answered directly to Ethan and carried higher clearance than Michelle herself. At the Imperial Company, access was controlled by strict clearance levels. No proper clearance, no entry to upper or underground floors. The tower housed 5 elevators in total. 2 staff lifts served only floors 1 through 5. 2 high-security elevators ran from the 5th floor up to the 49th. Only a single lift reached the 50th floor, home to Ethan's private residence and advanced research lab. From there, a hidden shaft plummeted down into the secret underground levels, no stairs or alternate elevators, so anyone without Ethan's ability to fly would meet a fatal fall. Every day, Megatron monitored Michelle's movements, ensuring she stayed exactly where Ethan needed her to be. Ethan's gaze softened as he watched Michelle fidget with her tablet. "You know you're incredibly important to me," he said, "but that doesn't mean I'll ever let you out of my sight, or out of Megatron's. You carry devices loaded with our monitoring software. Every gadget within 100 meters of you is feeding data back to our servers." Michelle's cheeks flushed. At 28, she was the chief operating officer of Imperial Corporation, an industry titan valued at over $100 billion. She'd earned every ounce of her authority, yet Ethan still treated her like glass. "I've even scattered dust-sized flying drones around the building," he continued, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Call them my boredom project. Some trail you at all times, the rest patrol the entire complex. They aren't much to look at, but they're perfect eyes and ears for Megatron's intelligence network. Michelle set her tablet down and looked up at him, feigning exasperation. You've labeled all this as protection, but do you really think our shareholders, or the public, will ever admit that level of surveillance? Ethan shrugged. Whether they come forward or keep quiet, it doesn't change a thing. There's no such thing as zero risk. This is as transparent an explanation as they're going to get. Michelle rolled her eyes, but she couldn't help smiling. He always had an answer, no matter how invasive, and deep down, she suspected she wouldn't have it any other way. If people don't admit they're vulnerable, they won't buy superhuman medicine. Ethan shook his head. Then aren't we just cutting off our own sales? From her vantage point as a premium market strategist, Michelle was point. That kind of stance would scare away buyers. Actually, she countered, it'll drive demand even higher. Ethan tilted his head, curious. Because people will worry about superpowered criminals? Michelle, ever the sharp-minded graduate, now nodded. Exactly. If thugs start using these drugs, law enforcement can't keep up. Who will you trust to keep you safe? Remember, in Amelie Kako, nearly half the population owns a firearm. Almost 1 in 2 people is packing heat. Ethan's eyes lit up with realization. Had she not explained so clearly, he might have doubted her qualifications. Right, he said. Superhuman medicine isn't just another supplement. It's the modern equivalent of a personal weapon. He paused, letting the weight of that comparison settle. We need to market it as essential protection in an increasingly dangerous world. Of course, I'd never want anything like that to happen. Michelle stared at Ethan, unsure whether she could take him at his word. Was a capitalist ever truly that generous? With the massive profits a superhuman serum could bring, she wondered if she'd be able to resist the temptation herself. Ethan watched her warily, then shook his head in mild amusement. So young, so earnest. Say one thing, then turn around and do another. Always performing, never revealing his real intentions. I understand, boss, Michelle said, though she wasn't certain she believed a single word. Ethan offered no further reassurance. That was fine. Let everyone warn of societal collapse at the hands of superhuman drugs. It only built demand for his. This was strategy in its purest form. Create the crisis, then sell the cure. His motivations might differ from the self-righteous moralists, but he relished the idea of shaking up the stagnant Marvel world. With Compound Number 1 at his command, he'd become a doomsday-style Superman, feared, powerful, and utterly unstoppable. What reason did he have to hold back now? Thanos could have smacked him twice before he even knew what hit him. That's precisely why Ethan was so generous in offering Superman the medicine. It was clearly more cost-effective and better suited to the task than Compound Number 1. For the 7th-generation tycoons behind the world's largest conglomerates, chaos can be a ladder to greater power, but what they truly crave is stability. No chaebol is foolish enough to gamble recklessly. They chase security, profit, and influence above all else. Unchecked turmoil may yield short-term gains, but when you're dealing with a brand-new human enhancement technology that has zero historical precedent, unpredictability is their worst enemy. Sure, Captain America might have been the ultimate super soldier, but soon there could be thousands more like him. How do you manage that kind of upheaval? Faced with such a radical shift, preserving the status quo becomes the only sensible priority. There will always be fringe extremists eager to shake things up, which is why the Superman drug fits their strategy perfectly. It transforms an ordinary person into a superhuman on demand, then lets them revert to normal once the mission is done. You get overwhelming force when you need it, and complete deniability when you don't. Compound Number 1, by contrast, remains their long-game solution, cultivating superhuman capabilities gradually and under tight control. They won't be as foolish as Ethan, afraid of something as simple as a musket and refusing to use it. Far from upsetting Compound Number 1's market, the arrival of the Superman drug has actually driven sales of both it and Compound Number 1 through the roof. Gentlemen, I'm stepping up to 2 updates a day starting now. So please remember to cast your votes, leave recommendations, and spend your monthly tickets on the newest chapters. My editor says I still have a shot at a featured recommendation, and I'm determined to make it happen. Let's push forward together. Chapter 23. What Every Man Understands. Ethan scrolled through his newsfeed and froze on the headline, "I never took Emperor Corp Superman serum to beat up 10 cover models, insists Tony Stark." He couldn't help but smirk. This guy really knows how to put on a show. Ethan had never expected someone would actually use Superman serum in a real fight, and to rough up 10 professional models in under an hour? No amount of performance-enhancing drug could pull that off. Yet Tony Stark, with all the conviction of a cornered lion, swore he'd never touched a drop of the stuff. He labeled the rumors slanderous jealousy and even hinted at a lawsuit to defend his honor. Classic damage control. But Ethan knew exactly what was going to happen next. Stark's very public denials would only stoke curiosity and desire. He could almost hear men everywhere exchanging knowing grins, reaching for their phones to place an order of Superman serum before the price went up. And with each tap of buy now, Ethan's profits would climb higher, and so would the legend of the one drug guaranteed to turn an ordinary guy into a one-man wrecking crew. After all, guys like that, well, they understood exactly what they were getting into. Ethan leaned back, a satisfied smile on his lips. Rather than exposing Happy Hogan's records of buying Superman drugs, for Tony Stark, he'd chosen a far more dramatic route. He had Hollywood's most magnetic leading man headline a commercial for the product. The slogan read simply, "Superman drugs, rediscover your confidence." The ad unfolded like a mini blockbuster. First, the actor downed a pill, then cameras followed him through an intense workout, each flex and sweat-dappled muscle on full, tantalizing display. Finally, in the spot's cheekiest moment, he collapsed onto a plush chaise surrounded by 10 of the industry's hottest cover models, arms draped around them with a knowing, triumphant grin. The sequence spoke volumes without uttering another word. Best of all, those 10 models were the same ones Tony had publicly outed just days earlier. Within hours, tabloids exploded and social media erupted into carnival-like frenzy. Nobody had seen this coming, not even Tony's fiercest critics. The only lament floating through the press room was that Ethan himself hadn't stepped into the spotlight to claim credit. Had the Empire Group CEO made a cameo, they all agreed, the uproar would have been earth-shattering. Of course, that was never going to happen. Ethan wasn't looking for applause. He wasn't Clark Kent. He preferred letting his moves speak louder than any public appearance. And with this latest gambit, the message couldn't be clearer. Ethan's powers aren't limited to super strength and flight. Thanks to his X-ray vision, he can peer right through Lois's clothes, technically no different from a standard medical scan, since they're both human, but once he switches it on, the effect is nothing short of unsettling. And with his super brain comes a perfect photographic memory. He can recall every detail of his life, even the time he wet the bed at age 1. It's more than a little embarrassing. When Ethan stepped onto that press conference stage, he exploded into the public eye. In a heartbeat, he was anointed America's most charming man, even though he isn't a U.S. citizen. Young, handsome, rich, single, and a bona fide genius, he's like Tony Stark, only younger, taller, and stronger. And unlike a typical playboy, he's managed to stay scandal-free. It's no surprise that American women are tripping over themselves to get his attention. Tony Stark, however, is fuming. Happy bought the Superman serum to give Tony an extra edge in tight spots. Tony's own idea was to market it as an aphrodisiac. He never expected Ethan to use the serum so brazenly, publicly flaunting the one ability everyone already suspected, and now Tony feels completely upstaged. At this point, Tony Stark had earned a reputation for being insufferably arrogant. His sharp tongue and brash attitude drove nearly everyone, heroes and villains, alike, to the brink of exasperation. So Ethan saw no reason to indulge him. Why should he? Besides, Stark was hardly in a position to demand favors. Lately, he'd been swamped with far bigger concerns. Across the country, everyone from city councils to state police departments and even National Guard units had been lining up at the doors of the Emperor Corporation, eager to negotiate partnerships. They discussed everything from municipal branding joint military exercises. Even America's sprawling healthcare system, which Ethan had long considered off-limits, reached out, lured by the staggering profits and market potential of his Superman drug. On several occasions, rival groups attempted to sabotage the project, only for their operatives to vanish without a trace. The CIA and FBI launched exhaustive investigations, but found nothing. No fingerprints, no leads, not even a whisper of foul play. Everything had been executed with such clinical precision that it convinced everyone one thing. The Emperor Corporation must have extraordinarily powerful allies pulling the strings behind the scenes. Ethan watched the city lights from his private laboratory, a faint smile playing on his lips. He'd long since realized that neither brute force nor betrayal would wrest his technology away from him. No matter how much they hated him, the consortium simply couldn't afford to kill him, and they'd never give up the enormous profits generated by Superman drug. Their cooperation was inevitable. To them, everything came down to money. He wasn't motivated by mindless revenge. He wasn't some spoiled extremist out for blood. The idea of waiting for the Chitauri to invade, then quietly steering them to do his bidding, appealed to him. If the world ended at their hands, what did it matter? Better to manipulate an alien onslaught than die trying to hunt them down. He could bide his time until the perfect moment, and if that moment never came, then he'd engineer his own. A high-profile terrorist strike powered by superhumans aimed squarely at the consortium's key players. A few dead magnates, a wave of global panic, and overnight, demand for his Superman drug in Compound No. 1 would skyrocket again. People would line up for the only cure strong enough to turn the tide of fear. He'd already sketched out the future of the Imperial Company, no longer just a chemical manufacturer, but the world's premier security and strategic consultancy. They would recruit superpowered soldiers, bind them with lifetime contracts, then deploy them as soldiers for hire, like Blackwater on steroids. Only in their case, the mercenaries would be unstoppable. Ethan turned from the window and approached the gleaming workbench. Rows of vials, some filled with the cobalt blue elixir he called Superman drug, others with the lighter Compound No. 1, stood ready for the next phase. He paused to run a finger along a vial's smooth surface. Soon, he'd begin recruiting his first operatives. Soldiers who owed him everything. Soldiers he could trust. The consortium would smile and nod, grateful for his cooperation. They'd never guessed that, with every deal they signed, they were tightening the noose around their own necks. And if anyone tried to stand in his way, if they ever thought to betray him, Ethan would simply unleash the true potential of his creations. Let them keep their profits. Let them keep their power. In the end, it was his world. And he was just getting started. Ethan leaned back in his chair, reviewing the day's latest intelligence. Word had spread fast. Private security firms like Blackwater were waking up to the profit potential of his Superman drug in Compound No. 1. Through Michelle, their intermediary, they'd already placed sizable orders. Yet despite their eagerness, Ethan knew they weren't true competitors. Emperor Biotech didn't simply repackage someone else's formula and slap on a new label. They designed, tested, and manufactured every breakthrough in-house, then deployed them as part of a full-spectrum security solution targeting bioterrorism and superpowered threats. By contrast, companies like Blackwater were nothing more than resellers. It was the old industry adage at work: would you buy from the pioneer who built the technology from scratch, or from the middleman who merely repurposed it? It was the same story that felled Nokia. Once an icon, too slow to adapt, outpaced by leaner, more innovative rivals. The numbers bore it out. In the last quarter alone, sales of the Superman drug in Compound No. 1 had jumped nearly 300%. Production lines were running round the clock, and Ethan's team of scientists was burning out. No matter how many recruits they hired, it wasn't enough to fill the backlog of orders. Storage facilities were overflowing and shipping delays were piling up. Ethan sighed. Expansion was essential, but skilled personnel were in short supply, and time was not on his side. He'd promised regulators and investors that every dosage would meet the strictest safety standards. Yet if he wanted to scale at this pace, unconventional research paths would have to be explored. Artificial human trials, cloning studies. The very thought sent a shiver through him. But unless he found a solution soon, Emperor Biotech risked falling victim to its own success. Ethan sighed as he surveyed the growing roster of agents he needed, or, more accurately, the lack thereof. Breaking in and training trustworthy personnel was a painstaking ordeal. Sure, he'd taught himself hypnosis, and thanks to his Kryptonian physiology, he could amplify simple suggestions into something approaching super hypnosis. But putting dozens of recruits under his sway one by one was still a logistical nightmare. Fortunately, he had another option. He could lean on the very bigwigs he'd already hypnotized. All he had to do was ask them to quietly place a few dependable operatives at his disposal, and the whole process would be far more manageable. Chapter 24. Infiltrating Investigator Boss. Michelle slipped into Ethan's lab, flanked by a striking woman with burgundy hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. Ethan's gaze locked on her the moment the door closed. That broad-shouldered silhouette beneath the company-issue office uniform, paired with an almost athletic poise, shouted, "Not your average assistant." His ocular implant whirred softly as it ran a covert scan. No uterine tissue. In other words, she wasn't who she appeared to be. Ethan raised an eyebrow but forced a casual tone. "Who is she?" Michelle rubbed her temples. Lately, she'd been surviving on 4 hours of sleep, buried under Imperial Company directives, expanding the medical insurance division one day, brokering a cross-border trade agreement the next. She simply couldn't juggle Ethan's daily paperwork on top of everything else. "This is Natalie," she said, crossing the lab's threshold with a stack of files. "Your new assistant. She'll manage your correspondence, schedule meetings, handle logistics, everything you've been missing while buried in research." Ethan nodded, mind racing. He'd already decoded Natalie's real role, an undercover investigator planted by forces within the company, or perhaps farther up the chain of command. Yet outwardly, he tucked away his suspicion. He didn't need Michelle worrying that her new hire would seduce him away. Romance was a luxury Ethan had no intention of indulging. Michelle exhaled with relief. "I know you'll give her a fair shot. Natalie's background checks out. Top of her class in investigative forensics. She's discreet, efficient, and won't get in your hair." She flashed a wan smile. "Unlike me." Ethan offered a thin smile in return. As Natalie took a seat across from his workstation, he watched her every movement, silent, precise, all business. Underneath that polished facade, he suspected, lay an agenda of her own, and he intended to unravel it before she unraveled him. Michelle watched Natalie slip into the boardroom and couldn't help but compare them. Natalie was younger, true, but Michelle had her beat in height, and, in her own eyes, in beauty. Besides, Ethan had shown no particular interest in either of them, so Michelle didn't need to worry he'd suddenly flirt with Natalie. If the newcomer ever planned to make a move, her past behavior would have given it away. Meanwhile, Imperial Company's rapid growth had brought Michelle into contact with Pepper Potts of Stark Industries. Once she discovered Pepper's close ties to Tony Stark, the billionaire genius and notorious playboy, a plan formed in her mind. If she couldn't spark Ethan's romantic interest, she'd make herself indispensable in another way, by becoming someone he simply couldn't do without at work. That, she convinced herself, would secure her position far better than any flirtation ever could. What Michelle didn't realize was that Ethan saw her not as an irreplaceable right hand, but as a learning tool, one of many growth observation candidates he was evaluating before taking over Megatron. He never put all his eggs in a single basket, especially not in so pivotal a role as executive vice president. If Michelle were suddenly unavailable, through illness or resignation, would Imperial Company grind to a halt? Ethan had no intention of finding out. He was far too strategic to rely entirely on any one person. Ethan's superbrain processed information at a rate tens of thousands of times faster than even Michelle, Monarch's top human analyst. Yet, for all that raw power, he was still only human, and like anyone else, he hated to work. His secret dream? To eat and drink all day without lifting a finger. The twist was that, as soon as you dangled the right amount of money in front of him, he turned into the ultimate workhorse, an unsettling transformation, given how easily his mind could run away with itself. To keep him from overcooking his own circuits, Monarch had their advanced AI, Megatron, learning how to manage him. Megatron was no slouch. This artificial intelligence adapted at lightning speed, spotting inefficiencies and loopholes Michelle hadn't even imagined. Even Michelle's best efforts paled in comparison. A soft knock sounded at the door of Ethan's office. He looked up from his terminal and called out, "Natalie, Ready to apply for the senior vice president position? Natalie stopped in the doorway, squared her shoulders, and offered a crisp nod. Yes, sir, she said. Behind that composed facade, however, Natalie was really Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. Posing as a middle manager at Monarch, she'd been sent by Nick Fury to keep tabs on Ethan and dig up any dirt on the company. But Natasha never stopped at a single mission. With her unique skills, she had plenty of backup objectives tucked into her suit. Black Widow was Nick Fury's ace in the hole. The more skilled she proved herself, the more impossible assignments she could handle. Her current mission was to keep a careful, close watch on Ethan, a reclusive genius who shunned the spotlight. Fury had no way to recruit or question him directly. Ethan's brief news appearances offered too little for S.H.I.E.L.D.'s psychologists and analysts to build a reliable profile. They needed reams of data to model his thought processes. As Fury's designated observer, Natasha Romanoff recorded every detail of Ethan's daily life, habits, routines, even his silences. To guard against electronic interception or mishaps, her cameras were strictly offline. Still, the footage would let her review his behavior over and over, and later hand the tapes off to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intelligence officers and mental health experts for deeper analysis. Today, she decided to break the ice. She glanced at her notes, then looked up at Ethan, who was sitting across from her in the small, dimly lit safe house. I've been going over your background, she began. Model, polyglot, impressive resume. Quick question, though. How do you say lurking in Russian? Ethan paused, his eyes drifting to the window as if he were seeing something there. Then, without answering, he murmured something entirely unexpected. Ethan watched Black Widow's face intently, searching for even the slightest flicker of emotion in her dark eyes. But she remained utterly impassive. When he posed his first question, she answered in flawless, calm Russian. Unfazed, Ethan pressed on in the same tongue, his accent shifting with remarkable ease, as though he'd learned Russian from every region at once. And for a moment, Black Widow struggled to keep up. Without missing a beat, he switched again. Ancient Egyptian rolled off his tongue, followed by a rare West African tribal dialect, and then the notoriously intricate Wenzhou dialect of the Celestial Empire. At the last, Black Widow's polite composure cracked, and she simply shook her head in bewilderment. Ethan allowed himself a wry half-smile. He'd hoped to hear her respond in Wenzhou. After all, not even the hero of Endless could manage Chinese, but he would have to settle for this silent admission of defeat. Through the exercise, Black Widow gained new respect for Ethan's brilliance and his unshakable confidence and skepticism. Finally, he switched to English, eyes bright. Very impressive, Miss Natalie. You've passed. From the shadows at the edge of the room, Michelle stared, utterly stunned by the multilingual duel she had just witnessed. Michelle, Black Widow Hart, was a recent graduate of a top university, and she prided herself on being able to outthink almost anyone. The one thing she hadn't quite mastered, however, was disguising her speech. Her attempts at a London or American accent still sounded a bit off. She forced herself to smile and gave a polite nod. Thank you very much, Mr. Ethan. Ethan Sterling returned her smile with calm courtesy. Michelle watched him carefully. This was her usual way of probing a newcomer's character. In her experience, no man could sustain the guise of a true gentleman without betraying the slightest tell. Yet Ethan's composure remained steadfast. His gaze never lingered inappropriately. He met her eyes directly, with nothing more than friendly interest. Then you'll be responsible for part of the operation going forward, Ethan said evenly. Michelle caught her breath. If Ethan was assigning tasks, she might be handing over some of her own responsibilities. She already juggled several part-time roles. She leaned forward, eager to understand exactly what he had in mind. That sounds fine. How have you divided the workload? I've already drawn up the schedule, Ethan replied, tapping a neatly organized folder he'd set on the table between them. I've adjusted the team rosters so that you and I share oversight. That way, we can cover more ground without risking any gaps. Michelle studied the documents. True enough, Ethan had anticipated every contingency, shift rotations, reporting lines, even backup protocols. It was all laid out in meticulous detail. A flicker of admiration passed through her. She had always worked alone, trusting only her own instincts. Teamwork, Ethan seemed to suggest, could be even more powerful. She closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Very well, Mr. Sterling. I accept your plan." Ethan inclined his head. "Excellent. Then we'll meet again tomorrow morning at 0800 hours to finalize the handover." Michelle stood, offering him a crisp salute. "Understood. See you then." He returned her salute with a faint smile. As she turned to leave, Michelle realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to having a partner who could match her at every turn. They serve as the top executives in each department, for example, the Chief Financial Officer, CFO, Chief Operating Officer, COO, Chief Human Resources Officer, Chief Information Officer, CIO, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Brand Officer, CBO, Chief Negotiation Officer, CNO, Chief Public Relations Officer, CPO, Chief Quality Officer, CQO, and so on. Chapter 25, Pleasant Torture. Ethan leaned back in his chair and studied the organizational chart glowing on his tablet. Modern corporations often separate ownership from management, assigning key roles with the CXO system, C for chief, O for officer, and the letter in between specifying the division, CFO, CMO, CTO, and so on. It was an elegant way to cover every essential function. Michelle already served as Chief Technology Officer, a title Ethan himself had arranged to streamline decision-making. Beyond CTO, she simply couldn't take on any more part-time posts. Her plate was already overflowing. Considering her relentless work ethic, it wasn't surprising she felt stretched thin. As her boss, Ethan didn't want to push her past her limit. A good leader anticipates his team's needs, not drains them dry. When Michelle proposed a new roster of assignments, Ethan paused. They were a team of 3. Himself, Michelle, and one other specialist. In such a compact group, traditional hierarchies felt unnecessarily rigid. There was no need to lean on Michelle's authority just to manage day-to-day tasks. Instead, Ethan quietly reassigned several critical responsibilities to their top field agent, codenamed Black Widow. He offered a half-smile as he tapped her name on the screen. No one wanted to waste a talent like hers. Although it was a bit tongue-in-cheek to load all the heavy lifting onto their strongest operative, Ethan knew Black Widow thrived on pressure. With her unmatched physical prowess and tactical instincts, handling Operation 7118 would be a welcome challenge. For Michelle, and for the rest of the small, tight-knit unit, this redistribution promised relief. And for Ethan, it was simply good management. No one left behind, and every asset used where it mattered most. Ethan had anticipated Michelle's objections and dispelled them before they even materialized. He promised her a significant raise, and with that on the table, she fell silent. Michelle's eyes widened as she watched him override her carefully laid plans and hand over chunks of her authority and responsibilities to the woman they all called Black Widow. From that moment on, Black Widow treated Michelle's fading influence with a cool indifference. Her true mission was to infiltrate Emperor Corporation, rooting out any illicit dealings or damning black files. She was to maintain daily contact with Ethan, gathering whatever intelligence she could on his behalf. Michelle needn't worry about any secret alliance. Black Widow had no intention of colluding with her. She understood that once her assignment was complete, she'd be gone, and the empire of documents and departments would revert to Michelle's control. But before she could settle into her surveillance role, Ethan handed her an even more ambitious directive. "I want you to recruit every chief officer and senior manager in each department as soon as possible. Emperor Corp has many vacancies to fill." He paused, fixing her with a steady gaze. "You'll have carte blanche to bring in talent, agents, analysts, anyone from S-Sealed or Hydra who's proven their worth. Once they step through our doors, there's no turning back." It was a golden opportunity for Black Widow. Ethan intended to strengthen his hold on the company by placing loyal operatives in every corner of the organization. These were not average hires. They were hand-picked specialists. Under Ethan's roof, their loyalty and their capabilities would be locked in tight. "As for their assignments," Ethan continued, "we'll be putting our new recruits straight to work on 2 top priorities: the Superhuman Serum Project and Compound NR 27. He let the names hang for a moment, allowing their significance to sink in. Both programs were tightly guarded secrets, Ethan's crown jewels. Black Widow nodded. Between her ongoing intel-gathering mission and the ambitious recruitment drive, she would soon have unprecedented access to Emperor Corp's inner workings. And all the while, Michelle would be left scrambling to piece together what she'd lost. Ethan turned and left the office, leaving Black Widow to plan her next moves. Within days, a fresh wave of candidates, steely operatives with records of success, would begin streaming into Emperor Corp's headquarters. The boardrooms, once echoing emptily, would soon buzz with whispered conspiracies and coded conversations, all under Black Widow's watchful eye. And at the center of it stood Ethan, orchestrating every shift in power, confident that no one, not even Michelle, could foresee the full scope of his game. Ethan knew all too well the power of Compound Number 1. Just a single vial could spark envy in every corner of the world. It halted aging itself, and no one could resist its lure. Even if Nick Fury had no intention of seizing it, Ethan was certain Hydra would move heaven and earth to claim it first. He decided to entrust the retrieval to Natasha Romanoff. Natasha, Black Widow, paused at the unexpected directive. As the newest operative, she had never been given a mission of this magnitude. Had Michelle somehow disappointed Ethan? Was their roster so thin he had no choice but to lean on her, or was he simply testing her? She couldn't be sure. "I understand, sir," she said, steadying her voice. Natasha knew she couldn't act alone. First, she'd brief Nick Fury and get his approval. Only then would she finalize the plan. Ethan watched her gather her equipment and mobilize without hesitation, a small smile crossing his lips. Though Michelle bristled at the sudden change of assignments, she set aside her discomfort and threw herself into supporting Natasha with professional dedication. Even though she felt uneasy, Michelle knew she had to prove herself worthy of her new role and maintain her professionalism. After all, she'd only just stepped into this position, a critical post that Ethan, the CEO, wouldn't hesitate to fill with someone else if she faltered. What he needed was an executive who knew when to press forward and when to pull back. Someone decisive enough to grasp his goals at a glance and arrange everything to his satisfaction. Not a petty rival demanding obedience in the name of feminism. Ethan had even considered appointing a male vice president at first, but Michelle's performance was simply too impressive to ignore. Gone was the immaturity of her early career. In its place stood the confidence and aura of a true powerhouse, capable of moving at the speed of his thoughts. Michelle, quietly nicknamed the Black Widow among a few insiders, never imagined how many tasks Emperor Corp had piled up. She worked straight through to 11 o'clock that night before she finally had a moment to catch her breath. Rubbing her shoulders, she wondered aloud, do big companies always have this much on their plate? She knew one thing for sure. If she didn't start recruiting more support soon, she'd be overwhelmed before she even caught up. Nick Fury stared at the dossier on his desk. Natasha Romanoff still hadn't finished untangling Ethan's affairs or uncovering the Imperial Corporation's hidden agenda, and she certainly wouldn't have time to both tail Ethan and delve into the company's secrets at the same time. He'd been waiting 24 hours for her report. Just as he was about to call it a night, his secure comm crackled to life. "Fury. Sir, I've got something," came Black Widow's hoarse reply. Fury sat up. "Go on." He's recruiting new specialists, a small team but hand-picked experts," Natasha said, her voice tight with exhaustion. Fury's pulse quickened. Recruiting? That was exactly the opening they'd been looking for. S.H.I.E.L.D. had once slipped surveillance bugs into Tony Stark's Malibu mansion under the guise of renovation work. No one ever suspected a thing. But by the time anyone realized the Imperial Corporation's headquarters mattered, it was too late to implant devices. This recruitment drive could be their chance to place operatives right inside Ethan's inner circle. "Let me get this straight," Fury said. "He brings in fresh talent, our opportunity to embed our own people." "Exactly," Natasha affirmed. "If we can slip deep cover agents into his new team, they'll have unfettered access. From there, we can map his operations from the inside out." Her wariness crackled over the line. "My feet are killing me. After 10 hours scouting and tailing leads, I feel more beat up than after a firefight, but I'm on it." She paused. "Give me a few hours rest, and I'll start vetting candidates tonight." "Good plan," Fury said. "Coordinate with me. We need our operatives in place before he finalizes his roster, or I'll be stuck juggling day-to-day issues and miss the real intel." Understood, she replied. I'll be ready. The line went dead. Fury leaned back, a small smile forming. Finally, they had a way in. The Imperial Corporation's secrets wouldn't stay hidden for long. Ethan slid a file across the table to Nick Fury. Here's the candidate list you asked for. Beyond that, I'll head straight to the universities and run campus recruiting. Fury nodded once, sharply. Good. Monarch's growth has outpaced even our highest expectations. But we can't let open headcount slow us down. Hit every major career fair, partner with top programs, and bring in the best. Let Black Widow handle the influx of applications. She'll need you to help sort through the resumes. Black Widow leaned back in her chair and massaged her temples. Monarch Corporation's meteoric rise had come with one unexpected headache. Talent. Not only were the big headhunting firms already lining up to pitch us candidates, but over-ambitious employees from our companies were slipping their resumes under our door. Tomorrow, our inbox will overflow with thousands of applications, and that's just the first wave. In Stark Enterprises, she'd never had to deal with this. Stark was mature, well-staffed, and their recruitment pipeline was always full. At Monarch, we're racing forward so fast that we've left 10,000 positions empty in our wake. The thought of opening another resume file made her head pound. Ethan watched Natasha's weary expression and felt a pang of sympathy. If anyone could sort this out, it was her, but he'd volunteered for backup. I'll set up AI filters and bring in temp HR support, he offered. We'll get through the backlog faster. She shot him a grateful glance. Thank you. We can't let personnel bottlenecks derail the company now. Fury tapped the table. All right, team, get to work. He rose, authority radiating from him. Monarch's mission doesn't pause for paperwork. With that, he strode out, leaving Black Widow and Ethan to tackle the recruitment onslaught and to keep Monarch's unstoppable momentum alive. Ethan allowed himself a cruel smile. The sound of her agony thrilled him far more than any mere glimpse of her naked body ever could. If he had used his perspective to strip her bare, he'd have seen writhing parasites and crawling mites beneath her skin, hardly an appetizing sight. No, this was a purer pleasure, the knowledge that her suffering existed because of him. Good night, Black Widow, he whispered as he turned to leave. There's plenty more fun to come. Stepping into the darkness, he paused just long enough to overhear Nick Fury's urgent questions and Natasha's strained responses. Every word would feed into his next move. News that Emperor Corporation had launched its recruitment drive spread like wildfire. Within hours, every major headhunting firm dispatched envoys to visit Black Widow and Michelle in person. After all, you can't beat the sincerity of a face-to-face meeting, even in our age of phones and emails. If this had been any other company, even Morgan or its peers, such a gesture might have seemed excessive. But everyone sees Emperor's unstoppable ascent. It's poised to become the next Big Mac of industry. Who would wait and risk missing out? For headhunting firms, relationships with Fortune 500 giants are everything. Securing Emperor as a client promises unrivaled resources and access to elite talent. Unlike talent exchange centers that passively await applicants, headhunters specialize in swift, covert operations, poaching high-level candidates who never even appear on the open market. And now, with Emperor on the prowl for top talent, the race is officially on. Headhunting firms usually go after top-level executives, presidents, vice presidents, general managers and their deputies, HR directors and managers, finance, marketing, product and technical directors and managers, factory or plant directors, department heads, senior project managers, lead engineers, even postdoctoral researchers, PhD holders, and high-level business consultants. In short, anyone at or above the manager level. By contrast, the Talent Exchange Center deals with blue-collar workers, entry-level administrative staff, and regional specialists. Sometimes they'll actively recruit exactly the talent a client requests. Other times, they simply maintain a roster of available candidates and wait for the right match. Even the biggest headhunting firms have been known to offer steep discounts on their commissions, anything to secure a placement. So when one of those top firms approached Ethan and insisted on taking him to dinner, he couldn't help feeling puzzled. If it were some billionaire investor or an industry titan like Warren Buffett, a dinner invitation would make perfect sense. But why would a headhunting company go to such lengths? Ethan only realized once he saw the man across the table that this recruitment agency dinner was less about filling a position and more about forging connections. Fine by him, he was here to experience new things, and he saw no reason to refuse. Still, he wouldn't have accepted a routine headhunter's invite, which made him all the more curious about tonight's host. This restaurant, the agency representative said as they were shown to their seats, is strictly private members only. Hundreds apply for entry, but only invited guests may dine here. No matter how wealthy, unqualified people simply can't book a table. The man opposite Ethan looked every inch the consummate gentleman, silver-white hair neatly combed back, wire-frame glasses perched on a sharp nose, an unfussy navy suit that spoke of understated wealth. Ethan felt he'd seen the fellow's face somewhere, perhaps in a business journal or at a charity gala, but his cultural diet leaned toward comics and blockbuster films, not elite networking. "Sounds exclusive," Ethan replied, folding his arms with a half-smile. "I'm not easily impressed." The stranger's courteous smile didn't waver. Ethan studied him, mid-40s, maybe early 50s, with a calm, precise air, someone accustomed to being listened to rather than spoken over. "Pleased to meet you," Ethan offered, extending his hand. "Likewise," the man answered. He regarded Ethan for a moment, then asked, "And you are?" "Ethan Cole." "Daniel Whitehall." Whitehall returned the handshake, his smile widening just enough to show interest. Then, in a low, confident tone, he began to speak. Ethan tapped his neural interface and pulled up the dossier. Hydra. Of course they'd come calling. His breakthroughs in superhuman medicine and human enhancement technology were nothing short of revolutionary, enough to earn him the nickname Father of the New Humanity in several scientific journals. And with each passing day, his woe, RK, only gained momentum. Hydra's singular obsession has always been world domination, no matter how its various factions squabble among themselves. Their greatest proof of concept is Captain America. Before Tony Stark debuted in the public eye, Steve Rogers stood alone as the definitive super soldier, an ideal blend of human will and engineered strength. Few people remember the many failed prototypes that came before him, but everyone knows Cap's legend. Once the world witnessed his battlefield prowess, governments and shadowy organizations alike threw endless resources into super soldier research. From these programs sprang both noble heroes and ruthless villains. Yet despite decades of competing projects, none have matched the sophistication and reliability of Ethan's enhancement process. His fully realized super soldier protocol leaves every Hydra prototype in the dust, and that, more than anything, explains why the organization has come for him now. They know that whoever controls the next generation of enhanced humans controls the future, and Ethan isn't about to let them have it without a fight. Ethan sat quietly in the observation room, watching the man they called Dr. Daniel Whitehall. Only a handful of people knew the truth behind Whitehall's smooth, silver hair and steel-gray eyes. He had once been Werner Reinhardt, Hydra's brilliant and notorious leader. Back in the spring of 1945, Reinhardt had been the organization's chief scientist, obsessed with unlocking the secrets of superhuman ability. His experiments had bordered on the grotesque, dissecting subjects, probing their organs, harvesting DNA. Ultimately, his work caught the attention of SHIELD agent Peggy Carter, who orchestrated his arrest and shipped him off to the classified underground prison known as the Wrath Hole. For more than 40 years, he languished there, until, in 1989, Alexander Pierce, then director of SHIELD, but secretly a Hydra operative, arranged his medical parole. When Reinhardt emerged, he vanished into the Austrian foothills, slipping back into Hydra's folds. There, at a remote research outpost, he made his most audacious discovery. Jiaying, a prisoner with inexplicably ageless flesh. Driven by equal parts scientific curiosity and cold calculation, Reinhardt dissected her, studying every cell and strand of DNA until he cracked the secret of her longevity. In the process, he used her genetic material to rejuvenate his own aged body, emerging physically middle-aged, if morally more monstrous than ever. Jiaying died on the operating table, her remains cast aside like lab waste. Within a year, Reinhardt had woven himself back into Hydra's hierarchy under the alias Dr. Daniel Whitehall. His colleagues thought they were working with a rising star of the new generation. None suspected the skeletons in his closets. Now Ethan, Agent 33 of Eschild, a specialist in hypnosis and covert interrogation, was here to meet him for the first time. As Whitehall stepped through the one-way glass into the small debriefing chamber, Ethan straightened his tie and rose to greet him. Whitehall's pale lips curved into a measured smile. "Agent Ethan," Ethan supplied, keeping his tone polite but firm. He returned the smile with one of his own, disarming, professional. "You must be Dr. Whitehall." "Please," Whitehall said, settling into the chair opposite, "call me Danny." Ethan nodded once. Behind that calm exterior, he was sizing the man, every twitch of muscle, every flicker in his eyes. He'd read every file, memorized every photograph. He knew Reinhardt's legacy, but secrets weighed heavily on both their minds tonight. As the overhead light hummed softly, Ethan leaned forward. "Then let's begin." And in that moment, Hunter and Hunted locked gazes, each one determined to uncover the other's hidden truths. Daniel looked at Ethan with calm intensity. "I'm the director of a major scientific research institute," he said. "I'd like to discuss a potential collaboration." Ethan's surprise quickly turned to skepticism. He'd assumed Daniel's interest in him was some kind of sinister scheme, mind control, or experimental enhancement. Yet Daniel's composed demeanor suggested something different, a character assessment. The subtle, leading questions were straight out of hypnosis and psychological profiling. Even elite operatives might falter under such scrutiny, but Ethan recognized the tactics instantly and deflected them without breaking stride. As Daniel watched him, Ethan took the opportunity to dissect his true intent. Was this a bid to recruit him into Hydra? Preposterous. Hydra already boasted multiple high-ranking operatives in the United States alone. Or was Daniel offering him a subordinate role? The audacity of the notion was galling. Agreeing would instantly make him one of Hydra's snakeheads, and Ethan had no desire to join their ranks. Behind Daniel stood Whitehall, whose polite overtures had just been turned down by Ethan. He looked tense, frustration flickering across his features. Quietly, he turned to his aide. "Sir," he murmured, "do we proceed as planned?" Whitehall squared his shoulders and met his assistant's gaze. "Yes," he said calmly, though the faint crease at his brow betrayed the storm beneath. "It's totally understandable to want votes and reader feedback. Every writer does. Here are a few ideas to help boost engagement. 1. Post regularly, but consistently. Set and stick to an update schedule so readers know when to check back. Even short teaser updates or progress posts can keep your audience engaged between full chapters. 2. Engage your audience. End chapters with a compelling cliffhanger or question to encourage comments. Ask readers what they think might happen next, or invite theories. Respond to comments. Readers are more likely to vote when they feel heard. 3. Promote your story. Share short excerpts or character art on social media, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, with relevant fandom or writing hashtags. Post in forums, Discord servers, or Facebook groups dedicated to your fandom. Just be sure to follow each community's self-promotion rules. 4. Strengthen your story's first impression. A polished title and concise, intriguing summary help draw readers in. Consider investing time in a cover image or banner. People do judge by covers. 5. Encourage voting. At the end of your chapter, gently remind readers that votes and comments are greatly appreciated. You could even offer a small incentive, like posting a bonus scene or artwork once you hit a vote milestone. 6. Collaborate and cross-promote. Team up with fellow authors for shoutouts or guest posts. Recommend similar stories or ask other writers to recommend yours in return. Remember, building a readership can take time. Keep writing, stay engaged, and the votes will follow. If you'd like feedback on your chapters or help polishing your writing to keep readers hooked, just let me know. I'm happy to help. Chapter 27. Absurd Facts. Whitehall's right-hand man stood at the curb, arms folded and lips curled in contempt. "He's filthy rich, and yet he won't even hire a bodyguard," he sneered. "Does he honestly believe New York is safe enough to go it alone?" He relished the moment. If Ethan refused to submit to Lord Whitehall, then he'd show him just how ruthless the real world could be. Ethan eased his car through the neon-lit streets. Late-night New York pulsed with energy, but in this upscale district the tax revenue was so high that police patrols were thick on every corner. In America, after all, a city's police strength is funded by local taxes. and here those taxes were paid faithfully. As Ethan drove on, he straightened the rearview mirror. "Here they come," he murmured to himself. A pair of black Chevrolet SUVs appeared from side streets, accelerating hard. In a blur of polished steel and tinted glass, the first SUV lunged forward, slamming into Ethan's bumper. Before he could swivel the wheel, the second SUV barreled into his side. Onlookers froze. Some gasped, others whipped out phones, convinced a guerrilla film crew had set up an impromptu action scene. The air crackled with tension. Was this performance art or a real street battle? Nearby, a pair of uniformed officers sprang into action. One hand hovered over his holstered firearm, the other keying the radio for backup. "Unit 12 to dispatch," he reported sharply. "Shots, or at least collisions, in progress. Possible armed suspects. Send officers immediately." Ethan steadied his grip on the wheel, every muscle primed for what came next. In a city that never sleeps, he knew one thing for sure: the night was only just beginning. Moments later, two black Chevrolets skidded to a halt. A dozen masked men poured out, each wielding automatic rifles, submachine guns, and breech shotguns. Their torsos were sheathed in heavy-duty tactical armor, the kind of full-insert bulletproof plating banned ever since the AK gang's infamous standoff that cost the police dozens of casualties. While regular body armor is technically off-limits, genuine combat-grade plates shouldn't exist in civilian hands. Yet here they were, proof these attackers had deep connections. Patrol cars scattered as officers dove behind concrete barricades, radios crackling frantic calls for backup. Ethan's armored sedan sat in the middle of the street, its matte black finish making it an obvious target. One thug, shotgun slung casually over his shoulder, stepped forward. He thumbed the breech loader with a menacing grin. "It doesn't matter if your car's bulletproof," he taunted. "We've got enough explosives to turn it into scrap." Ethan unspooled his seatbelt and swung the door open. He rose to his full height, meeting the thug's glare without a flicker of doubt. "Let's find out," he said, his voice calm and steady, and then he stepped onto the asphalt, ready for whatever came next. Right away, the entire street fell silent. Everyone stared, curious. Who had just caused such a commotion? A bystander pointed and whispered, "That's Ethan, the CEO of Imperial Company. He's the rising titan of the business world." Instantly, cell phones whipped out. Clicks of cameras echoed as civilians and onlookers tried to capture the spectacle. Nearby, uniformed officers shared worried looks. Ethan was no ordinary entrepreneur. He'd forged an official partnership with the police department and counted several high-ranking officials among his allies. If someone dared abduct him here, it would trigger a scandal straight to Washington. "Why isn't he surrounded by bodyguards?" one officer muttered, voice tight with concern. Another cracked his knuckles. "We won't let anything happen to him. Not on our watch." Before they could move closer, a band of armed men burst from a side alley. One of them snapped orders. "Grenades, now!" They lobbed a barrage of canisters into the crowd. "Get down!" shouted a patrol sergeant, diving for cover. Panic erupted as extra-loud blasts rattled windows. Shock grenades, not lethal explosives, but potent enough to disorient and spread chaos. Shoppers screamed and scattered, ducking behind cars and market stalls. Sirens wailed in the distance as Ethan's police escort fanned out, weapons drawn. Through the haze of smoke and flashes, their priority was clear: protect Ethan at all costs, and stop this assault before it spiraled completely out of control. They'd watched enough Hollywood blockbusters to know the havoc a grenade could wreak, and they weren't about to stand there like sitting ducks. Yet Ethan didn't even flinch. That only infuriated the Hydras. One of them lunged forward, ready to shove Ethan to the ground and bind his hands. Bang! The explosion reverberated like a baseball bat striking a ball at supersonic speed. Anyone not flattened by the shockwave instinctively covered their ears. In the blast's aftermath, Ethan stood firm, fists clenched. His punch had left a perfect human-shaped crater in a nearby car's hood. Inside that twisted cavity lay one of the gang's thugs. Limbs grotesquely bent, chest caved in, he looked beyond dead. The Hydras stared in horror. How is that even possible?" one gasped. Ethan offered a casual grin. "You think that's strange?" Before anyone could answer, he vanished from sight. Alarmed yells erupted as the Hydras darted for cover, leveling their guns and scanning every shadow for their elusive opponent. It must be said, Hydra's current maneuvers looked more like a panicked SEAL team in an action movie, scattering east and west, their formation completely broken. Then, one of the Hydra operatives spotted Ethan. Everything clicked into place. Of course, he'd taken advantage of human enhancement technology. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the nerve to venture out alone, unguarded. But even enhanced bodies have their limits, and no one is invulnerable. The operative raised his thermal pistol and fired, carefully aiming for non-lethal shots. Bang! The muzzle flashed. For an instant, time seemed to slow. Then Ethan simply lifted his hand, palm shut tight around something that glowed with intense heat. No cry of pain, no reflexive dive for cover. He just stood there, utterly unharmed. The Hydra agent's mind went blank. This was impossible. Thermal rounds were designed to shred flesh, and even the toughest steel plating would dent on impact. Yet here he was, staring at a man who'd just taken a point-blank shot without so much as a flinch. Bulletproof, somehow. Ethan remained perfectly intact, as if the shot had been nothing more than a gust of wind. Ethan's voice was calm but firm as he held out his hand. "I'll give it back to you." Before his very eyes, the compact bullet across his palm flattened into a thin, razor-like disc. With a gentle flick of his wrist, almost playful, Ethan sent it spinning through the air. In an instant, it sliced clean through one of the Hydra's limbs, turning what had been a powerful leg into a spray of gore. "No!" The creature's howl echoed like metal tearing, its pain raw and unfamiliar. Panic flashed in its eyes. Ethan tilted his head, offering a half-apology smile. "Sorry about that. I guess I got carried away." Even as he spoke, the other Hydras staggered back, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Their commander, however, refused to yield. One of them raised its rifle and squeezed the trigger, desperate to land a blow on this impossible adversary. Ethan didn't bother dodging. In a heartbeat, he vanished and reappeared behind another Hydra. His fist detonated against its spine, sending the creature crashing forward. Without missing a beat, he yanked its arm free at the shoulder, bone and muscle parting in a sickening rip, then tossed it aside like a broken toy. Hearing their comrade's death throes, the remaining Hydras panicked. They opened fire in a fusillade of desperation, bullets ripping into walls and floor, none of them hitting their target. Ethan watched the tracers streak past, expression unreadable. Then, with one more easy step, he was among them. Their weapons clattered harmlessly to the ground as he dismantled the last of them in mere seconds. When the dust settled, silence reigned, broken only by Ethan's quiet exhale. He dusted his hands together, nodded once, and walked away. The ruins of the skirmish lay behind him, a testament to power no Hydra could ever hope to withstand. Chapter 28: Flesh and Blood versus Thermal Weapons. Ethan stood motionless as a torrent of bullets tore through the air. His bioforce field flared to life the moment the first round struck him. Rifle fire pinged harmlessly off his chest, his arms, even his face. The Hydra operatives kept screaming and squeezing their triggers until their magazines clicked empty, only to realize too late that they had lost any chance of killing him. "It's over," Ethan said, voice calm and unhurried. "You no longer have lethal force." He flexed an open palm, and a faint glow gathered above it. "This," he added, "is called a howitzer." A moment later, a concussive wave rolled outward in all directions. The howitzer round, an advanced Qigong shell, shredded the Hydra squad in an instant. Flesh and fragments of body armor rained down, leaving no intact body behind. The blast billowed dust and scorched grass into the air, then subsided. Ethan brushed an invisible layer of debris from his impeccably tailored suit, as if dusting off a coat of fine wool. With his bioforce field, not a hair on his head had been ruffled. A nuclear bomb could have gone off around him, and he'd still look ready for a tuxedo gala. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The New York Police Department descended on the scene within minutes, blocking off the streets and fanning out around the crater of destruction. They'd move fast. Ethan knew they had to. An attack on their soil demanded a swift response, or the military and federal oversight committees would tear him apart for negligence. He folded his arms, meeting the first pair of uniformed officers with a steady, unbothered stare. The night air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and ozone. Ethan simply waited, his field of energy still shimmering, as the law closed in around him. In just 10 minutes, Both the New York City Police Department chief's office line and his personal cell phone were bombarded with calls and messages. Under that relentless pressure, and after being publicly castigated, the chief felt utterly cornered. He feared losing his badge, or worse, spending time behind bars. At one point, he even contemplated taking his own life. The trigger was an audacious attack in one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. A group of armed assailants had tried to kidnap a powerful industrialist, an influential tycoon whose fortunes and connections made him a prime target. In the chaos that followed, the attackers lobbed stun grenades, injuring bystanders and sending panicked crowds scattering in every direction. People were trampled, others seized the moment to snatch goods and disappear into the confusion. Word spread quickly among New York's elite, and Wall Street financiers erupted in outrage. This was their turf, their home. How could such a brazen assault take place here? If one prominent figure could be attacked so easily, who was safe? Fear and anger rippled through high-powered boardrooms and private clubs. Determined to prevent a repeat of this disaster, the city's wealthiest movers and shakers pooled resources, amped up security, and vowed to crush any threat before it could strike again. No single police chief could shoulder the fallout from this disaster. Many people would ultimately be held accountable. Yet when the investigators reviewed the footage, every question pointed to Ethan. Automatic rifles bounced harmlessly off his defenses, and even at point-blank range, his assailants couldn't faze him. True, his homemade suit appeared to be bulletproof and highly resilient, but the surveillance tapes showed rounds striking his exposed face and hands, and those unarmored areas remained completely unmarked. What electrified the room was the energy blast he unleashed at close range. After analyzing the scorch patterns and residual signatures at the scene, experts agreed its force rivaled that of a 105mm howitzer. What? That powerful? A murmur ran through the assembled brass. They were looking at a walking, breathing howitzer, an energy weapon generated by a human being. The closest precedent they knew of came straight out of science fiction. At best, they'd seen military-grade lasers. "This is beyond anything we've ever encountered," one officer whispered, eyes wide. "How can biological energy even begin to compare with thermal energy? Where on earth is he getting all that power?" In the dim glow of the command center's monitors, the team of researchers stared in disbelief. Ethan's latest energy discharge, a blazing torrent that incinerated everything in its path, had shattered every known boundary of human enhancement. This wasn't just an incremental step beyond modern biology. It was light years. "We've exhausted every theory," Dr. Rice muttered, tapping frantically at her keyboard. "He's fused so much bioenergy that it behaves like plasma. The only way I can imagine something this potent is if he's literally running on a miniaturized cold fusion reactor, like something Stark Industries might build." Her colleague, Dr. Patel, leaned over her shoulder. "And he can fire it again and again without showing any sign of strain. If a squad of fully armed troops with automatic rifles can't even scratch him, we might need to deploy machine guns or heavier ordnance." A third scientist, Dr. Kim, shook her head. "You know, that's not feasible. He's weaving through New York streets like a ghost. There's no opportunity to bring in tanks or rocket launchers without risking massive collateral damage." Despite the wreckage that lay scattered across half a city block, the analysts had managed to recover fragments of several advanced warheads. What stunned them most was the inconsistent flight paths. One shell had ricocheted 5 times off concrete and steel before finally coming to rest nearly 300 meters from its original trajectory. Scores of bullets remained intact, having simply deflected around Ethan's glowing aura. The room fell silent as they reviewed the footage again. Each frame was a testament to Ethan's terrifying edge. No standard military hardware could match his raw, biological might. As the city reeled from the aftermath, the researchers realized one grim fact. Whoever Ethan truly was, and however he had come to possess this technology, he had changed the rules of engagement forever. Chapter 7. Unbreakable Defense. The forensic team gathered in the dimly lit analysis room, eyes glued to the playback monitor. Frame by frame, they watched the assault unfold, Ethan standing motionless as the assault rifle barked a relentless hail of bullets at point-blank range. When the dust settled, the magazine was empty, and Ethan was unscathed. Close-range strafing with an automatic rifle like that would punch straight through a 2-centimeter steel plate, Dr. Marlowe remarked, tapping the monitor. Yet he didn't budge. He took every round to the flesh and blood barrier and didn't crack. Lieutenant Chavez frowned. Not even metal fatigue spotted on the vest? No deformation? None, Marlowe answered. His defense exceeds any standard ballistic armor we know. Not even a machine gun salvo would do it, unless you switch to armor-piercing or higher-caliber rounds. Sergeant Patel leaned forward, skepticism etched across his face. What about sniper rifles? A .50-caliber round should blast right through. That's exactly the next test we're planning, Marlowe said. He paused the video and zoomed in on Ethan's gloved hand. But here's the real enigma. He caught one of the bullets. The room fell silent. What do you mean, caught it? Patel asked, incredulous. Marlowe pointed out the exact moment on the timeline. See this? The second bullet should have struck him in the forearm. Instead, he moved his hand, faster than any human eye or camera could capture, and snatched it out of the air. Chavez rubbed his temples. That implies supersonic reflexes. His nerves and muscles must be operating at speeds far beyond normal human limits. Marlowe nodded. Yes, his reaction time, his muscle response, even his perception, are all off the charts, and yet there's no sonic boom. No, armally, moving a limb faster than the speed of sound would create a shockwave, but there's no audio signature, no distortion. It's as if he phases through that threshold altogether. Sergeant Patel stared at the monitor in awe. Frame skipping, like the bullets simply vanish before they hit him. Exactly, Marlowe agreed. In the footage, there's a fraction where the bullet and his hand occupy the same space. Then, snap, the scene skips forward. When it resumes, the bullet is in his palm, intact. Lieutenant Chavez exhaled slowly. If he can't be injured by conventional or even upgraded firearms, what's our next step? Marlowe turned off the monitor and met their gazes. We keep testing, and we prepare for the possibility that no projectile will ever breach his defense. He may be beyond any weapon in our arsenal. A tense hush settled over the room. They were no longer dealing with a super soldier. They were facing something entirely new. And whatever Ethan was, he had just rewritten the rules of combat. Beyond anything else, the sonic boom from that bullet, traveling faster than any supersonic round, was enough to send those armed thugs sprawling across the street. News of the incident spread like wildfire, and within 12 hours, Emperor Corporation was inundated with requests for private demonstrations. Wealthy clients and power brokers who'd never given the company a second thought were suddenly clamoring for an audience. They couldn't believe Ethan had walked out unaccompanied. No armored escorts, no bodyguards. With this kind of firepower at his fingertips, they wondered who was really protecting whom. If Ethan was this formidable on his own, what desperate edge must his Hydra program confer? These magnates weren't short on cash. They were, however, terrified of death. What Ethan had shown them was the ultimate guarantee of survival. And now they wanted that guarantee for themselves. If necessary, they'd bulldoze a path straight into Emperor Corporation, tanks, explosives, whatever it took, to steal the human enhancement technology. After all, Tony Stark got to keep his Iron Man suit. Why shouldn't Ethan share the same privilege? Whenever someone inquired about buying the device, Ethan instructed Michelle to tell them it was a prototype, cutting-edge technology from Emperor Company, still plagued by production setbacks and not available for sale. The experts clearly saw through the flimsy excuse, but with no better option, they were forced to accept it. Chapter 29, My Boss is Superman? Dr. Whitehall stared in disbelief at the charred remains of his forward outpost. He'd never expected Ethan to wield such devastating power. Every Hydra operative he'd deployed was incinerated in moments, and the collateral damage had drawn the full attention of S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. Once intrigued by Ethan's genius, as brilliant as Tony Stark, Fury was now openly wary, convinced the young man was too unpredictable to recruit or control. Meanwhile, every move Ethan made was being logged by Hydra's sleeper agents embedded within S.H.I.E.L.D. What had been planned as a triumphant turn of events threatened to blow the entire organization's cover. Alexander Pierce's call came like a thunderbolt. The moment Whitehall answered, Pierce barked, "What happened out there?" Who gave you the authority to send my men on that suicide mission? Whitehall forced himself to stay calm. Pierce, I followed orders. Don't give me that, Pierce cut in, voice low and icy. Those were my agents. They're dead now, and Fury's noticed. He's been monitoring Ethan ever since. If Hydra's involvement surfaces, he'll dismantle us piece by piece. Whitehall's jaw clenched. Yelling won't change facts on the ground. Fury's already circling our operation. The only option is to... Enough, Pierce snapped. No more independent actions. No more surprises. Understood? One more misstep like this, and you'll pay the price. Whitehall ended the call without replying. As the line went dead, he pressed a hand to his temple. Ethan might be powerful, but Hydra always had a contingency. Now it was up to Whitehall to decide how ruthlessly it would be deployed. Chapter 12. It's not as if he wasn't aware of what was happening, and he even tacitly approved of it, Pierce said, folding his arms across his chest. But now that everything's fallen apart, of course he's going to point the finger at you, Reinhardt. Reinhardt leaned back in his chair, one eyebrow arched. So tell me, he said coolly, how do you propose I save face? Pierce tapped a finger against the polished tabletop. Let's be clear, he said. Your little Hydra cell will never be exposed. My men are all cut-rate mercenaries. You'll give Nick Fury the same answer I will. They were hired to kidnap Ethan. Nothing more, nothing less. Reinhardt's pale blue eyes narrowed. He knew Pierce was right. If anyone at S.H.I.E.L.D. dug deeply enough, they'd find Pierce's fingerprints on this operation. After all, it was Pierce who'd arranged Hydra's involvement in the first place. But admitting that aloud would be hazardous. Why should I trust you to keep your mouth shut? Pierce uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, a thin smile playing on his lips. Because, my friend, you owe me. Reinhardt slapped a hand on the armrest. I'm not your lackey. Helping you helps me just as much. Is that a threat? Reinhardt asked, his voice low. Pierce chuckled. No, he said. Consider it encouragement. He rose from his seat, straightened his tie, and turned toward the door. Remember our arrangement, Reinhardt. You'll hold up your end, and I'll hold up mine. Otherwise, you won't just lose this job. You'll lose everything. As the door clicked shut behind him, Reinhardt stared at the empty room, the words echoing in his mind. He'd played Pierce's game so far, and lost. Now, he had a choice, fall in or watch his world crumble. Either way, he knew one thing for certain. Ethan's fate hung in the balance, and time was running out. No, don't misunderstand me, Pierce, Whitehall says, his voice clipped. You've seen what Ethan can do. Do you honestly think he'll just let us walk away? Pierce scoffs, though his knuckles whiten on the edge of the conference table. Even he was shaken by the raw power Ethan displayed, and he wasn't sure the super cannon on the Insight battleship could even kill a man like that. If they let a superhuman of Ethan's caliber slip through their fingers, it would be a disaster. Whitehall falls silent, a flicker of regret passing over his face. He'd ordered that strike on a hunch, no concrete evidence, just to neutralize a threat. In his world, suspected mistakes get erased before they can come back to haunt you. But now he sees the error of his rashness. That's exactly what I'm getting at, he says at last. Instead of eliminating him, why don't we recruit him into Hydra? Recruit him. Pierce's eyebrows shoot up. He's never considered turning an enemy into an asset. Whitehall's proposal cracks open a new possibility. Do you think it'd appeal to him? Pierce asks, leaning forward. He's not American, nor is he allied with our current enemies, and he doesn't harbor any obvious grudge against Hydra, Whitehall replies coolly. We could offer him purpose, and keep that power under our control. Ethan's unexpected talents had everyone rethinking their next move. Hydra was infamous worldwide, especially in America, but Ethan showed no interest in pledging allegiance to any nation. That gave Pierce an idea. What if we fast-track him into Hydra? Pierce began tentatively. Even if he only becomes one of its new leaders, a head of the snake, it might be enough to bind him to us. Whitehall leaned back, steepling his fingers. And if he refuses, if he balks at the offer, we blow Hydra's cover. Pierce's brow furrowed. Exposed is exposed, he admitted. But if Hydra falls, our entire operation collapses. Whitehall's eyes narrowed. Explain. Pierce took a breath. We can't handle Ethan on our own. We need Hydra's infrastructure. If Hydra is compromised, it won't matter. We'll have agents embedded around him. We'll keep tabs on him, guide his actions behind the scenes. Ah, Whitehall said. You're talking about deploying Swallow. Exactly. Pierce nodded. We let the world, or at least Hydra's enemies, think they've uncovered Ethan's ties to the organization. While everyone's busy investigating, Swallow and her team slip in, shadowing him, steering him, and if we find a way to control him, why worry about Hydra's fate? Whitehall allowed a thin smile to twitch at his lips. Once we arm him with our enhancements, human body augmentation, mass-produced super soldiers, Hydra's exposure becomes irrelevant. What matters is that Ethan becomes the vector for our next phase. Pierce paused, weighing the implication. Technology or no, what he craved most was stability, an unshakable foundation for the plans he'd set in motion. And if tethering Ethan to a sinking Hydra shell did the trick, so be it. Ethan could already taste the day when he'd hold the entire world in his hand. Nick Fury sat back in his chair, frowning at the looped surveillance footage. Time and again it showed Ethan, his protégé, wading into crowds of armed thugs and dismantling them with terrifying ease. Fury rubbed his temples. How on earth did this happen? He'd never imagined Ethan making headlines like this. By every measure of raw power, the young man was a living, breathing Hulk, invulnerable and nearly unstoppable in human form. S.H.I.E.L.D. had known about Bruce Banner's existence for years, but Banner's volatility had kept them at arm's length. If Banner had been as controllable as Ethan, Fury would have dispatched agents to enlist him long ago. America's armed forces already feared the Hulk. An officially sanctioned superhuman like Ethan could change the balance of power overnight. Fury had immediately reached out to Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. But she was on back-to-back missions and hadn't received the message. Only Michelle had been briefed, and technically, she'd had no obligation to inform Romanoff. Now Natasha was left in the dark, calling Fury back with a single incredulous question. Wait, my boss is an invincible Superman who can lob howitzers at will? Fury sighed. There was no easy way to explain just how deep this rabbit hole went. Natasha Romanoff paused the playback and looked up at Nick Fury, her brow furrowed. How's the Imperial Company investigation going? Fury leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It's only been a day. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Ven for me, a single day isn't enough to dig up solid leads on that outfit. Then prioritize, Fury said, his tone gentle but firm. If you can't pin anything down right away, report back to me immediately. Natasha opened her mouth to protest, but Fury held up a hand. Listen, he continued, eyes narrowing. This kidnapping doesn't feel straightforward. There's more to it than meets the eye, and I want your best on it. She met his gaze, the weight of the mission settling on her shoulders. Understood. I'll get on it right away. Fury nodded, the lines of worry around his eyes deepening as he watched her go. Something about this case was off, and he trusted Natasha to find out exactly what it was. Chapter 30. Crossing Again. Michelle hadn't had a free moment since the incident. Overnight, the Imperial Corporation was inundated with meeting requests from powerful figures, people Ethan simply couldn't afford to offend. Every time he flatly declined an invitation, Michelle bit her tongue. Arguing with him about protocol would only create more trouble. It wasn't until days later, after back-to-back conference calls and VIP walkthroughs finally wound down, that Michelle found a gap in her schedule. She made her way to Ethan's private lab and paused at the doorway. He stood motionless inside, encased in the gleaming exoskeletal suit the press had nicknamed Steel Skin. Even now, she half expected to see damage from the firefight. Rumors said that bullets and thermal rounds, humanity's most destructive weapons, had failed to pierce his armor. Ethan, she said softly, stepping forward. Are you hurt? He lifted his head and gave her a calm, reassuring smile. I'm fine, Michelle. Heart pounding with relief, Michelle circled him, inspecting every plate and fiber optic conduit. Our technology really holds up under fire? He ran a gloved hand over the smooth alloy shin guard. It does. Michelle exhaled. In her world, just as S.H.I.E.L.D. had intended, mutants were little more than a shadowy rumor, tightly controlled by Hydra, then wiped out in the public eye by Nick Fury. To everyone outside a handful of clandestine circles, Ethan was the first true Superman, proof that human ingenuity could produce a real invincible hero. She met his steady gaze and realized that, whether the world knew it or not, Ethan's journey had only just begun. Beyond this lab and all the classified briefings, neither of them fully understood what came next, but they would face it together. Michelle felt a chill run down her spine, as though she were staring at some uncanny predator rather than a calm young man. There was no visible aura around Ethan, no crackling energy or threatening glare, yet the effect was purely psychological. Remarkably, even after the killing they'd just witnessed, Ethan showed no hint of disturbance. He simply collected himself as if nothing had happened. Cutting-edge technology often outpaces imagination, Ethan said, voice level, especially the kind developed in national labs of major powers like the United States. But until you solve the mass production problem, it remains nothing more than a theory. He paused, letting Michelle absorb that. She thought for a moment, then nodded. So this breakthrough couldn't be replicated or manufactured in volume. They were the only ones with access to it. And it's not just a single transformation technology, Ethan continued. It's the fusion of multiple human enhancement methods, each one building on the last. Michelle's brow furrowed. You mean you underwent a series of augmentations, genetic edits, nanotech implants, neural interfaces, all layered together? Precisely, he confirmed. None of it works alone. We had to integrate new gene editing protocols, advanced nanoparticle delivery systems, customized biofeedback loops. The list goes on. Every step was a puzzle, and we solved them one by one. She studied him, unsettled by how composed he remained. That sounds dangerously attractive to governments or rogue organizations. If they ever untangle your process and scale it up, they could produce endless squads of super soldiers. Ethan's gaze was steady. That's our vulnerability. If they ever mass-produce it, all bets are off. But until then, we're the only ones who have cracked the entire sequence. Every other lab is still stuck researching isolated components. Michelle exhaled, glancing at him with a mix of awe and apprehension. He looked almost too calm for someone who'd just taken a life. He gave the faintest shrug. That, he said quietly, is the real edge. Michelle had warned him more than once. Even if it meant pouring tens of billions into cutting-edge technology and lavish perks, there would always be buyers with deep enough pockets. She feared Ethan and couldn't endure the relentless pressure. He simply shrugged. Anyone who tried to push him too far vanished. That was the benefit of real power. To the outside world, it was obvious that Emperor Corporation would recruit someone utterly ruthless, regardless of pedigree. Otherwise, Hydra wouldn't dare hope to recruit Ethan and elevate him to snakehead status. Their plan was to wait until he cracked under pressure, and only then make their move. Later, in his glass-walled office, Ethan glanced up as Michelle entered, tablet in hand. How's the company looking now? He already had Megatron's briefing, but he valued Michelle's thoroughness. She frowned at the screen. Natalie's filled almost every position. The only vacancies left are senior roles that require your approval. She's already uploaded the candidates' profiles to your terminal. Ethan inclined his head. Excellent. I'll review them tonight. Michelle paused at the doorway. Do you think Hydra will strike before you finish? He offered a faint, confident smile. If they believe they can wait me out, they're about to be very disappointed. Ethan powered up his computer and immediately spotted a new batch of files from Black Widow in his inbox. She must have worked around the clock. What took most people days to compile was ready in just one. While others might still be wading through the data, Ethan needed barely a minute to skim the overview. He then fired up the Megatron AI for deeper analysis. 10 minutes later, he'd internalized every candidate's profile. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Sean, Red, Termir, keep them on the roster. They're exactly what we need. Michelle watched from the doorway, concern flickering in her eyes. Assigning senior executives at this speed left no room for error. These were the people who'd have to act if a crisis hit. She cleared her throat. Boss, should we run any additional checks on their backgrounds? Ethan leaned back in his chair, confidence radiating from him. No need. At Emperor Company, we don't carry dead weight. If it doesn't work out, we'll replace them, Ethan said evenly, gazing across the boardroom. Right now, those firms are the ones begging to join Imperial Enterprises, not the other way around. We're in control. I can let any of them go at will. And on that note, we're expanding our portfolio. I want us to acquire companies in entertainment, computing, and gaming. We can even consider defense contractors, so long as they're large enough to move the needle. Michelle clicked her pen shut and looked up. Understood, Ethan. She didn't find his strategy surprising. In the corporate world, growth was everything. By snapping up rivals and diversifying into new sectors, Imperial would create thousands of jobs, effectively binding local and federal governments to its success. No administration, domestic or municipal, could risk a corporate collapse that would unleash waves of unemployment. Even in the most hard-nosed capitalist systems, a sudden economic shock would translate into a political backlash. From Asian chaebols to Western conglomerates, every major player relied on exactly this kind of ruthless expansion. Because the United States took the lead and perfected the model, everyone else followed in their footsteps. At the same time, targeted industry acquisitions can give Emperor Corporation the boost it needs. Right now, the company is like a body whose head has already flown hundreds of kilometers ahead, while its legs have only just left the starting line, crawling forward at a snail's pace. Without those acquisitions, it would take at least 10 years for the body to catch up to the head, and by then, the head will likely be off the planet altogether. Of course, acquiring new industries brings its own challenge, keeping the head, body, and feet in sync. Managed well, you can smooth things out in a few years. Mishandle it, though, and no amount of acceleration now will prevent a protracted lag later. But Ethan would never allow that. Why waste his superbrain on anything less than perfection? 1. He'd tied up the boardroom decisions and mapped out Emperor Corporation's next strategic moves. He finally turned back to his own project. Cross! Ethan shouted. With that command, he initiated the crossover once again. Ethan noticed that the portal remained about the same size as when he'd returned to the Marvel Universe from the Dragon Ball world. There was no change at all. This confirmed his earlier theory. The portal's dimensions depended on his own strength, not on the level or nature of the world he was traveling to. Chapter 31. The South transforms into a kindergarten. Ethan's energy channel swelled as his power reached new heights, but even that wasn't enough to withstand Broly's devastating blow. His body shattered under the impact, and he tumbled to the floor in pieces. Then, in an instant, the doomsday gene within him roared to life. Flesh, muscle, and bone reknit themselves at a speed visible to the naked eye, restoring him in seconds. My cells, they're recharged, Ethan gasped, flexing his hands as crackling energy pulsed through every fiber of his being. No, this is stronger than before. He rose to his feet and surveyed the laboratory, taking in the unfamiliar equipment and the planet's rugged horizon seen through a shattered window. He was still on Broly's world. A digital clock on a console blinked insistently. 1 month had elapsed. It only took me a second to jump back to Marvel from the Dragon Ball universe, Ethan mused, brushing dust from his jacket. But traveling here cost me an entire month, at least according to Broly's planet. Who knows how much time has passed on Earth? He clenched his fists, determination shining in his eyes. I haven't returned home yet. There has to be more to this time slip ability than just hopping between worlds. Ethan took a steadying breath. His doomsday gene was now brimming with energy, his regenerative powers stronger than ever. If he could master the flow of time itself, then perhaps he could not only navigate between universes, but also control when and where he landed. With that resolve burning in his chest, he stepped forward. The adventure was far from over, and the real test of his newfound strength and temporal mastery was just beginning. Ethan focused his mind, activating the teleportation ability that would carry him back to Earth. His heightened senses monitored every shift in his body, while his super-intelligent brain ran the calculations necessary for interdimensional travel. Within moments, a shower of golden light erupted from him. His form dissolved into a stream of glowing particles, drawn through a translucent portal large enough to envelop the entire planet. He reformed almost instantly in the familiar setting of Capsule Corporation's laboratory. Ethan dropped to one knee, though the journey had drained only a fraction of his energy. As he stood, he noted with mild surprise that the entire facility was deserted. No scientists, no security staff, no familiar faces. With a quiet resolve, he left without alerting anyone. There was no point in announcing his return just yet. Consulting his wrist device, Ethan realized a full year had elapsed on Earth since he'd departed. Time here moved differently than in the universe he'd just left. He allowed himself a brief nod, he'd expected as much, and then retrieved his dragon radar. His mission remained unchanged: collect all 7 Dragon Balls before anyone else could. Even now, the radar's screen lit up, showing several Dragon Balls clustered in close proximity. Evidently, someone had already begun their own search. Ethan's jaw set. Whoever was gathering the Dragon Balls would have to move fast, because he intended to claim them all first. With that thought, he slipped out of the lab and into the bustling corridors of Capsule Corporation, determined to close the gap between himself and those dragon orbs. Ethan descended from the sky and landed just beyond a small clearing where a handful of strangers had gathered. In the blink of an eye, he dashed forward, snatched the Dragon Balls they'd been guarding, and vanished before anyone even realized what had happened. A quick scan revealed the remaining orbs tucked away in a quiet alcove, unmanned and unprotected, so he collected those too and slipped them into one of his universal capsules. As he rose back into the clouds, Ethan reflected on the lessons he'd missed last time he faced Broly. Tunnel-visioned by that battle, he'd overlooked some of the Dragon World's most remarkable abilities: instantaneous teleportation, the metamorphosis technique taught at the Southern Transformation Academy, even the Jinyu Force's incredible time stop by holding their breath. Not to mention the realm of magic, Majin Buu's bizarre power to turn living beings into candy, clay, or worse. Now that he held all 7 Earth Dragon Balls, his next move was clear: a direct journey to planet Namek. The Namekian Dragon Balls could grant 3 wishes at once, and even if those wishes could be limited to a single person, their potential far surpassed Earth's orb. If he could unlock every technique and spell in the Dragon World through the Namekian Dragon Balls, his power would skyrocket. But first, Ethan set his course for the Southern Transformation Academy. There, he would master the metamorphosis technique before embarking on the grand quest that awaited him on Namek. Ethan closed his eyes and widened his super hearing, tuning into every conversation and pulse of sound across the globe. In an instant, his enhanced brain deciphered the signal: the secret location of the Southern Transformation Kindergarten. Without hesitation, he soared across continents and hovered above the low-slung classrooms where dozens of children were learning the art of shape-shifting. Slipping into a seat among them, he listened as the instructor droned on about the fundamentals. Ethan's hyper-intelligent mind processed each concept almost instantaneously. Within minutes, he had fully absorbed the entire transformation technique. He rose to his feet and, voice calm and resolute, commanded, "Transform." A crackle of energy raced through his body. Bones lengthened, flesh reformed, and gleaming metal plates fused around his frame. When the light dimmed, Ethan stood as a 50-meter-tall robotic colossus, his eyes glowing with unchallenged power. He reflected on how the technique normally worked. Complete mastery granted unique attributes. Wulong's incomplete transformation, for example, let him become a missile that could even outrun Sun Wukong's legendary somersault cloud. But Ethan's sheer Kryptonian might overwhelmed such nuances. No matter how refined the skill, a 50-meter-tall Kryptonian powerhouse was devastation incarnate. Imagine the havoc one such giant could wreak. Ethan reviewed the mechanics of his complete transformation technique one more time. The time it takes to shift forms depends entirely on how much physical and mental energy he devotes, and there's no upper limit to how many times he can transform. In theory, with sufficient reserves, he could switch shapes at will, even repeatedly within the span of a single second. Given that his physiology now combines the resilience of Doomsday with the boundless vitality of a Kryptonian, those reserves are effectively limitless. He let out a low whistle. All right, then, next up is the Red Ribbon Army. Last time, Ethan had been stretched too thin to hunt down Dr. Grow, but now he had all the time and strength he needed. The Red Ribbon Army was the perfect target, a ruthless, world-conquering organization divided into regional units, each overseen by its own cadre, but ultimately answering to a single commander-in-chief. Their soldiers terrorized local populations into forced labor, and their coffers and arsenals were the envy of any regime. Known far and wide as the most evil army in the world, They would prove an excellent first demonstration of just how unstoppable Ethan had become. Chapter 32. Learning and Mastery. Hidden deep in the western forests of Earth, the Red Ribbon Corps headquarters sprawled across an area the size of a small town. Cannon turrets and machine gun nests bristled along every perimeter wall, and anti-aircraft missiles tracked any unauthorized flight path. Inside, a network of high-speed elevators whisked personnel between reinforced levels. None of it slowed Ethan. In a heartbeat, he crossed the open courtyard, dodging bullets and rockets that trailed harmlessly through the air like sparks in his wake. His super speed rendered the world sluggish. Each missile, each crack of gunfire, hung suspended as he dashed past. "Intruder alert!" a guard shrieked into his radio. "How many?" barked a voice from the command center. "Only one," Ethan replied coolly as he slipped into the communications room. Red warning lights bathed the console panels. Alarm sirens screamed. Ethan paused, surveying the stunned operators around him. With a casual twist of his wrist, he shattered the main display into glittering shards. Nobody dared move. He allowed himself a moment's thought. If motion alone made him untouchable, how had Superman ever been felled by Batman's kryptonite spear? If raw power and reflex could dodge any attack, why had a mere human managed to land that blow? Picking up the communicator handset, he pressed it to his lips. "Black Marshal, right? You have 1 minute to surrender. Actually, who am I kidding? That's too generous. Better if I just end this now." Bored, he tossed the handset aside and stepped forward. Every defense Red Ribbon Corps could muster wouldn't save them now. Ethan was here to learn and to master everything they had to offer. Ethan advanced through the corridors of Red Ribbon Army headquarters in a single unstoppable sweep. Clutched in his hand was a device encased in a crackling air shield, an indestructible orb of energy. He hurled it without hesitation. The projectile tore through reinforced steel plating, shattered concrete, and cleaved through flesh. In one lethal strike, it obliterated the Black Marshal. Less than 60 seconds had passed since Ethan's arrival, and already the heart of the enemy's stronghold lay in ruins. Only one officer remained standing. Black Blake, the Marshal's adjutant. He raised a trembling hand. "Wait, we're willing to surrender." Before the words left his mouth, Ethan unleashed another torrent of power. Blake's head vaporized, his plea cut short in an instant. Ethan lowered his arm, voice calm and cold. "I hate Mo," he said, "but I accept the surrender of anyone else." Silence fell. The surviving Red Ribbon soldiers, struck by fear and the speed of their commander's demise, dropped to their knees, heads bowed in submission. Ethan's eyes swept the room. "Bring me Dr. Grow," he commanded. With guards scurrying to obey, the famed scientist could not escape. Ethan intended to break him through hypnosis, strong, unrelenting pressure on the mind. He knew Dr. Grow posed a unique challenge. A true genius of forbidden black technology, the doctor's signature creation was the infinite energy furnace, a power source so vast it could rival planetary explosions. In fact, at a combat rating of 10,000, its output was on par with the force King Vegeta once unleashed when he obliterated several planets with a single swing of his cloak. Now, with Dr. Grow cornered, Ethan prepared to extract every secret from the mastermind and end the Red Ribbon Army's reign of terror once and for all. The infinite energy furnace, whose output rivals, if not exceeds, the power of a Super Saiyan, would have destroyed the entire solar system the moment it detonated. Allowing someone with access to such black tech prowess to remain free was unthinkable. Dr. Garrow offered no resistance when they brought him before Ethan. He had watched Ethan single-handedly slaughter the entire Red Ribbon Army. Even Jarrow's most advanced camera drones couldn't track Ethan's motions. Astonishingly, there wasn't so much as a sonic boom. Otherwise, the shockwave alone would have flattened the Red Ribbon Army's headquarters. Ethan smiled, stepping forward. "Dr. Jarrow, I presume? A pleasure to meet you." Jarrow's eyes narrowed. "Tell me, young man, world domination your goal?" Ethan shook his head, amusement flickering in his gaze. "Dominate the world? Hardly. What I want is your artificial human research." "Artificial humans?" Jarrow echoed, intrigued. Up to now, his experiments had yielded little more than heavily modified cyborgs, human tissue grafted onto weaponized frames. But after witnessing Ethan's effortless power and perfectly natural physique, Dr. Garrow realized he'd underestimated the possibilities. Here stood a living blueprint for something far more extraordinary than any mechanical soldier he'd ever conceived. Doctor, Garrow's eyes suddenly sparked with inspiration as he sketched out bold new directions for android development. "We'll build androids every bit as powerful as I am," he declared. Ethan gave him a confident smile. Understood. Though Jarrow outwardly accepted Ethan's plan, Ethan couldn't shake his lingering doubts. In the end, he resorted to hypnotism to secure Jarrow's cooperation. Yet in a world teeming with unpredictable powers and magic, he knew that any mental lock might eventually falter. He refused to sacrifice himself or simply hand over Broly's genetic material for Jarrow's experiments. Instead, he was determined to master the technology personally. Ethan's strategy was clear. Let Dr. Jarrow reveal the secrets of his infinite energy reactor, absorb every detail himself, then eliminate any chance of betrayal. The promise of next-generation androids was too great to entrust to anyone else. He would not only learn the existing science, but also push its frontiers. Within days, the Red Ribbon Army pivoted their entire research program. Commanders and squad leaders from across the organization were summoned back. Each possessed prime genetic material for new android prototypes. Aside from Cell, none of Garrow's previous creations had been built entirely from scratch. Now, with Ethan steering the project, the Red Ribbon Army was poised to usher in a revolution in artificial human design. All of Dr. Garrow's androids began life as human templates. Androids 17 and 18, for example, were engineered from the genetic material of a captured sibling pair. But Ethan had even bigger ambitions. He'd handed Jarrow the Saiyan DNA he'd extracted from Sun Wukong during his Dragon Ball quest. Faced with that kind of raw power, Jarrow couldn't resist incorporating it. Why settle for ordinary Earth-sourced genes like those in Android 16 when you could harness pure Saiyan blood? Under Ethan's direction, Garrow plunged into an intensive research cycle. Ethan seized every returning squadron commander, subjugating them, and converted the rest of the Red Ribbon Army into living test subjects to speed up the experiments. After all, they were expendable assets. The casualty rate was high. Many subjects died partway through conversion, and others emerged as unstable prototypes. Yet in the end, Garrow prevailed. He perfected the infinite energy reactor, a compact, self-sustaining power core, and introduced a new tier of enhanced creations he called super androids. Even so, Ethan saw room for improvement. Androids 17 and 18 still relied on elaborate mechanical components. Their bulky infinite energy reactors were a constant reminder that the technology hadn't yet achieved its true potential. Ethan hated the mechanical framework grafted into his body. He cherished the pulse of living flesh and the warmth of human emotion. Oh, he admired steel and colossal mechs who didn't love the raw power of giant robots, but the idea of fusing hard metal with soft tissue made him uneasy. He revered the Zerg as the ultimate triumph of pure biological evolution, and he even admired the sleek, transforming giants of Cybertron. Yet the two impulses, biology and machinery, just didn't feel right together. That tension drove Ethan's every waking thought. If only the infinite energy furnace could be adapted into a living organism. Read every ounce of his genius into that impossible goal, but the furnace's technology remained stubbornly alien, black box science beyond even his considerable skill. And yet he had already unlocked Dr. Garrow's most guarded secrets, the android programs that fueled number 17 and number 18 with limitless stamina, and the terrifying might of number 16, a construct rumored to outmatch a Super Saiyan. Whispers even suggested that Garrow had somehow integrated a biological variant of the furnace into number 16's core, though it still fell short of Super Saiyan 2 levels. At this point, Ethan realized that Dr. Jarrow had given up his greatest cards. There was nothing more the mad scientist could teach him. Still, Ethan did not destroy Jarrow. Mercy, he told himself, was its own experiment, one worth preserving, even in a world that had long since blurred the line between metal and flesh. Ethan held Dr. Garrow's fate in his hands, and he decreed that only the upgraded android could observe the doctor's every move. Chapter 33, The Second Way to Awaken Potential. Ethan stood atop the crumbling battlements of the ruined city, wind whipping through his hair. He'd watched Dr. Garrow's twisted legacy unfold firsthand. The brilliant woman who'd become his android wife, brought into being only after Garrow's dark transformation process, had already perished. From her shattered body, he had crafted Android 21, fusing in cells salvaged from both Cell and the enigmatic Majin Buu. Yes, even Buu possessed living, mutative tissue, and the tale of Garo's yet-to-be-born grandson, the future Dr. Hyde, was a story for another time, one that lay hidden in the movies of tomorrow. Namek is next, Ethan announced, his gaze drifting to the brooding heavens. He knew there was no time to lose. Without another word, he reached into the gathering storm and summoned the eternal dragon. In an instant, its serpentine form coalesced from the roiling clouds, its scales shimmering like liquid twilight. Beneath it, the Crimson Ribbon Army's android legion stood in perfect silence, a testament to Ethan's absolute control. Not even Dr. Garo himself could override their loyalty. They waited, motionless, for their master's command. Ethan raised his voice, carrying across the ruined expanse. "Dragon, grant me a single wish. I demand passage to Namek, the ancestral world of gods and the crucible of untapped potential." The dragon turned its glowing eyes upon him, its voice echoing like distant thunder. "You may have one wish. Speak it now, and speak it truly." Ethan hesitated, only a heartbeat. Rumors said that the name Namek rippled across space and time, drawing attention from every corner of the universe. He would have to be precise. "I wish to be transported to true Namek," he declared, voice ringing with resolve. "The only Namek where the divine heritage still thrives." A crack of thunder answered his plea. Lightning arced across the sky, and in that blinding flash of light, Ethan felt his very cells stretch and melt into the cosmos. When vision returned, he found himself standing on a vast emerald plain beneath 3 radiant moons. Thus began the next chapter of his quest, to unlock the hidden power of the gods themselves. "Your wish is simple, and it has been granted." With those words from Shenlong, Ethan felt that familiar tug again, and this time he offered no resistance. In an instant, the great dragon vanished, and the 7 Dragon Balls began to drift apart. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan's 7 androids sprang into action, each snatching up one orb as it floated by. Normally, the Dragon Balls recover their full power once they have all been gathered, but with young Son Goku already intercepting their energy, these orbs were weakened. Ethan had no intention of chasing them down himself, so he'd instructed his androids to collect them and hold on to them until he returned. That way, his next trip would be even more convenient. Under the lingering influence of Shenlong's teleportation magic, Ethan soon found himself drifting off to sleep, and what a comfortable slumber it was. Before he knew it, his mind faded to black. When he awoke, everything around him moved in slow motion. The journey had been astonishingly brief, far quicker than Goku's spaceship ever could have managed. Shenlong's power of instant transport was simply unmatched. Without the precise Namekian coordinates, Ethan would have faced a long, perilous flight or a risky dimensional crossing. Thanks to the dragon's wish-granted magic, however, the trip was over in the blink of an eye. "Is this Namek?" he murmured as he touched down. All around him, the landscape matched the descriptions he'd studied back home: rolling green grass, clustered with bulbous blue-green trees under a turquoise sky. Still, Ethan advanced cautiously. He exhaled, letting his ki flow outward in a low, steady aura, testing the air and sensing for any hidden threats. Everything seemed quiet, for now. Ethan strode across the rolling Namekian plains, every footstep echoing in the quiet air. He knew the great elder of this era still lived, and that such a powerful presence would soon detect him. Ethan meant no harm. He would never slaughter innocents. His spirit bore no darkness, but the sheer magnitude of his aura was sure to draw attention. A moment later, he felt it, an energy so vast it seemed to eclipse the sun itself, surging toward him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he gauged its strength. 42,000 power level. This had to be Nairu. He'd never truly measured his own might before, but now he realized he stood well below 10,000. "Who's there?" Ethan called out, squaring his shoulders though his pulse raced. In a flash, a tall Namekian warrior appeared, speaking rapidly in the native tongue. Ethan didn't understand a word, so he pointed at himself and spoke clearly, "Ethan." The Namekian's green-skinned face registered surprise. He answered with a single syllable, "Nay," then fell silent, as if weighing his orders. At last, he nodded curtly. Ethan sensed the unspoken command. The great elder wished to meet him. Nehru would escort him. refusal meant exile, or worse. Ethan met his escort's steady gaze without fear. Whatever awaited him before the Great Elder, he was ready. Ethan didn't flinch when he heard the whispers about Doomsday's new Kryptonian powers. What was there to fear? Even if Frieza himself showed up on Namek, Ethan would step forward without hesitation. Frieza never revealed his full strength at the outset. He liked to test an opponent's growth rate and adaptability first. He walked in silence beside Nai, weaving through Namek's emerald grasslands until they reached a wide, circular stone platform perched atop a gentle hill. There, seated in meditation, was the Grand Elder of Namek, his silver hair and flowing robes marking him as one of the planet's oldest and wisest. The moment Ethan stopped before him, a calm voice echoed in his mind. "Welcome, outsider." Ethan inclined his head respectfully. "Greetings, Grand Elder." "What is the purpose of your visit?" the telepathic voice asked. Ethan met the Elder's gaze without wavering. "I have come for the Dragon Balls, and to ask for your help in unlocking my hidden potential." A flicker of surprise passed through the Grand Elder's thoughts. Most seekers on Namek thirsted only for the wish-granting orbs. Few admitted outright that they hungered for greater power. Yet there was no malice in Ethan's mind, only determination. "Very well," the Elder replied at last. "There are 3 ways to unleash a warrior's latent strength: the super divine water, the life force of a Namekian elder, and the power of the Elder Kai sealed within the Kai's sword. The Elder Kai's technique yields the greatest increase, but drawing on a Namekian's own energy can still awaken astonishing potential. Which do you choose?" Ethan straightened his shoulders. "I would be honored if you, Grand Elder, would grant me the gift of your Namekian energy." A gentle smile touched the Elder's lips. "So be it. Prepare yourself." Closing his eyes, the Grand Elder began to channel his vast life force. A soft emerald glow rippled outward, enveloping Ethan in a warm cocoon of power, marking the start of a transformation that would push him beyond every limit he'd ever known. "Come here, kid." The Namekian Grand Elder beckoned, and Ethan stepped forward, heart pounding. He'd never seen a being this tall or so clearly not of Earth, and the realization that this was an alien only deepened his awe. The Grand Elder placed a gentle hand on Ethan's head and closed his eyes in concentration. "You possess tremendous potential," he announced. Ethan blinked in surprise. All this time, he'd only scratched the surface of his power. His Doomsday form was more than just a scary transformation. It was an incredible reserve of strength. He'd never triggered a true evolution. If he did, the Elder suggested, his abilities might skyrocket even further. Of course, Ethan preferred careful planning to head-on assaults. He'd already adapted Doomsday into a kind of fail-safe resurrection armor, opting to strike from the shadows there then charge in blindly. Now the Grand Elder began to coax that hidden power to life. Ethan felt something shift deep inside him. It was as if a colossal fish had bitten a line in his soul, and the Elder's psychic hook strained under the weight. Pain and exhilaration hammered through him, and when the Elder finally drew his catch free, he staggered back as if he'd given everything he had. Ethan stood trembling, but alive, and more powerful than ever before. Ethan felt a surge of power ignite within him, as if every fiber of his being had been set ablaze. His limbs trembled, energy crackling around him. "Ah!" he roared. In an instant, his aura flared so intensely that it smothered Neru's own ki. Neru's eyes widened in alarm as Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between the frightened Namekian and the Great Elder. With calm authority, Ethan asked, "What's my current combat power?" He didn't really know the exact figure, only that his aura had utterly eclipsed Neru's. In Dragon Ball terms, a 1.5 times gap was total domination. To be conservative, Ethan reckoned his true power had to exceed 60,000. Moreover, he'd wrapped himself in a bioforce field to dampen his signature, making it all but impossible for any device, even the one that once read future Trunks, to gauge his real strength. Ethan bowed respectfully to the Great Elder. "Thank you for your hospitality. Namek has a debt to me now, and should any crisis ever befall you, send someone to Earth. My name is Ethan." He lifted his head, eyes steady and determined, the promise of his words hanging in the charged air. Chapter 34. Unbelievable Wish. "I understand, Ethan," the Great Elder said with a gentle nod. He turned to his attendant, Nairu. "Send word to every village elder. Have them bring their dragon beads here without delay. Yes, Great Elder, Nairu replied, but his eyes flicked nervously to Ethan. Not long ago, he'd felt confident he could crush this young man in an instant. Now he was certain Ethan could do the same to him, and he feared for the Great Elder's safety. Sensing Nairu's unease, the Great Elder offered a reassuring smile. Do not worry. If Ethan meant us harm, he would have acted by now. Still unsettled, Nairu bowed and hurried off. Once they were alone, Ethan spoke quietly. Great Elder, I have a gift of foresight. I see that Emperor Frieza will soon lay waste to Namek. We must train more warriors. Only strength can save our world. The Great Elder fell silent, contemplating Ethan's warning. After a long moment, he looked up, respect shining in his aged eyes. You truly are remarkable, Ethan. Your counsel is invaluable. Ethan inclined his head, outwardly calm, but inwardly he wondered just how far the Namekians might go to protect their planet and their secrets. Ethan waited a moment, letting the Great Elder absorb what he just shared. Then he pressed on. In the original timeline, Piccolo was nothing more than a weakling. His power level barely scratched 10,000. Then he absorbed Neru, that lone Namekian warrior whose own strength hovered around 42,000. The instant he did, Piccolo's power exploded to over 1.1 million. And that was just the beginning. Later, when he fused with Kami, the very guardian of Earth and a true god, he grew so powerful that he crushed Cell's imperfect form in an instant, a cyborg foe that even Super Saiyans struggled to harm? Piccolo tore through it like paper. Think about it. If absorbing a single battle-hardened Namekian multiplies your strength 100-fold, what could happen if we produced dozens, no, hundreds of these fighters and fused them together? Frieza may be the galaxy's greatest tyrant, but his power isn't infinite. By creating more combat-oriented Namekians and giving them the ability to assimilate one another's strength, we could forge warriors with power levels in the billions. That's our only real chance of confronting and defeating Frieza. Ethan fell silent, his gaze steady. He'd laid out the strategy. Now it was up to the Great Elder to decide whether Namek's future would be forged through unity and fusion. The Great Elder sat in silence, weighing whether Ethan could be trusted. Namekians had a sacred gift, their ability to merge with one another to grow stronger. And that alone lent credence to Ethan's words. Besides, the enemy he described was so formidable that neither Neru nor any warrior Namekian could stand against him. By the time Neru returned the Dragon Balls, the Great Elder had already made his decision. Their people needed more fighters. With Emperor Frieza and his vast army threatening Namekian worlds, forging a new warrior caste was no longer optional. It was essential. Ethan, the Elder said at last, speak your wish. He signaled Neru to summon Palunga, the mighty dragon of Namek. Ethan, still unable to communicate fluently in telepathic Namekian, would speak through the Elder and Neru, just as the Elder had decreed. Ethan drew a steady breath. My first wish, he announced, is to gain the greatest power in the universe. At those words, the Great Elder's eyes flew wide open. Never before had anyone voiced so audacious a request. Ethan stood before the swirling, jade-green form of Palunga, heart pounding in his chest. At his side, the Great Elder's weathered face was drawn with concern. You're certain this is the wish you want, little one? The Elder asked softly. Ethan met his gaze and nodded. Beside him, Neru bowed and spoke Palunga's name, translating Ethan's words for the mighty Wish Dragon. A silence stretched over the chamber. Then Palunga's voice rumbled like distant thunder. I'm sorry. This request is beyond my power. Please choose another wish. Neru turned back to Ethan. Denied. Ethan's brow furrowed for only a moment before he spoke again. Neru relayed, I wish to learn every spell and every secret of magic in the universe. Palunga's reply came quickly, echoing through the vaulted hall. I'm sorry. This request is beyond my power. Please choose another wish. Again the denial. Ethan's lips curved into a faint, determined smile. Neru looked perplexed, but silently translated Ethan's third wish. I wish for a living spirit tree seed, plantable, not withered or dead. This time Palunga did not refuse. Brilliant light spilled into the room, and when it faded, a single iridescent seed hovered in midair before drifting into Ethan's outstretched palm. It's yours, Palunga intoned, and then was gone, leaving only the soft echo of its departure. Neru and the Great Elder exchanged puzzled looks. What kind of seed is this? Why would he choose something so unusual? Ethan folded the small orb of life in his hand, eyes shining. He said nothing, but Neru finally murmured explanations gleaned from ancient lore. The spirit tree, its fruit was once reserved for the gods alone. If you plant the seed, the tree will draw every nutrient from the soil to bear that divine fruit. But when the harvest comes, the land itself will be left barren, a wasteland where nothing else can grow. A hush fell over them as the weight of the choice settled in. Ethan's gaze drifted toward the horizon outside, where the first pale light of dawn was stirring the sky. He knew that, once planted, there could be no turning back. Legend has it that after hundreds of years, not a single blade of grass will grow on that land. The secret lies in the fruit of the spiritual tree. Dales ate just one and mastered the Kaio fist technique at level 10. When Sun Wukong sampled it, his power rocketed to 30,000, proof of the fruit's staggering potential. Yet Ethan remained certain there must be a limit. If these fruits really conferred infinite strength, Dales would already have been far more powerful before ever meeting Sun Wukong and his companions. A far more reasonable explanation is that Earth's life energy is uniquely abundant, and spiritual trees nourished by it bear fruits far stronger than those on other worlds. In other words, the quality and quantity of a planet's vitality directly determine the potency of its spiritual fruit. And since only gods partake in this divine nourishment, its ultimate ceiling must lie at godly levels, though whether it tops out at a Kaioshin or rises to the might of a great Kaioshin remains unknown. After all, when the Kaioshin first appeared in the original saga, even Piccolo gasped at his invincibility and surrendered on the spot. Ethan surveyed the battlefield with a critical eye. The enemy's strength far outclassed Dale's, but that didn't bother him. In fact, it excited him. With a wealth of reagents at his disposal, he could devote himself to mastering purification, extraction, and synthesis techniques to brew vastly superior enhancement potions. Who knew what might happen if he combined super divine water with Marvel's heart-shaped grass or other exotic ingredients he'd collected from across the multiverse? Gently sliding the precious seed into a secure capsule, Ethan paused to consider his remaining 2 wishes. He couldn't afford to waste them. After a moment's thought, he stepped forward and called out, "I wish for comprehensive magical instruction from every corner of existence. The demon realm, the celestial plane, everywhere." The air hummed with power. Neru, standing beside him, blinked in astonishment. This wish seemed impossibly grand, yet before he could question it, a deep, resonant voice declared, "Your wish is granted." Ethan braced himself, expecting perhaps a single tome or a few scrolls. An overwhelming torrent of arcane knowledge poured into his mind. Countless spells, ritual diagrams, elemental formulas, whole schools of magic from every world and every deity washed over him. A lesser scholar would have collapsed under the strain. Ethan felt only a thrilling surge of understanding. He opened his mental library and began to browse. There it was, transformation magic once wielded by Majin Buu, a technique probably learned from the supreme Kai god he'd devoured. Ethan's pulse quickened. With this, he could alter bodies, manipulate matter at will, become anything he imagined. The possibilities were endless. Clutching his head against the flood of information, Ethan smiled. With universal magic at his fingertips, he was more than ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Transformation is another name for this ability. It lets you reshape any living being into whatever form you desire. After all, Majin Buu can turn people into clay, so it's clear there's no limit to what you can transform. Chapter 35. Ethan's Grand Apprenticeship. Ethan stared at the seemingly endless library of arcane knowledge coalescing before him. Spells for every conceivable purpose, even the forbidden rituals for bending minds, were laid out like stars in the night sky. The Dragon Ball magic system was truly vast, and even with his supercharged brain granting eidetic memory and blistering processing speed, Ethan realized it would take more than raw intellect to master this repository. How long would it take to learn it all? He wondered, feeling the weight of 1,000 tomes press upon his mind. His enhanced cognition could store every page, but understanding and wielding each spell was another matter entirely. He turned his gaze to the slender Namekian elder and the great green dragon coiled nearby. This was his final chance. Summoning every ounce of resolve, Ethan spoke the words that would define his future. "My third wish," he announced, voice steady, "is the ability to learn any superpower in the universe." He knew powers took two forms, those granted by bloodline, like a Namekian's regenerative gift or a Saiyan's battle instinct, and those acquired through study. Sun Wukong's teleportation, for instance, relied on his own spiritual energy and had its limits. In contrast, the Kaiyohado used by the Supreme Kai bent space itself, allowing instant travel across galaxies. Ethan had no way of knowing whether that was an innate divine privilege or a skill learned among the gods, and he intended to find out. The dragon's luminescent eyes softened, then drifted skyward. With a slow, sorrowful shake of its head, it conveyed its regret. This wish lay beyond its power to grant, and in that moment, Ethan's chance slipped through his fingers, lost to the vastness of untapped magic. Ethan stared at the dragon's fading glow, disbelief written all over his face. "You're telling me magic can be learned," he said slowly, "but superpowers have to be born with you?" He shook his head. Ever since he'd first watched Dragon Ball, his envy had settled on Captain Jinyu's ability to stop time simply by holding his breath. If Jinyu hadn't been hampered by low energy limits, that power alone would have made him leader of the Jinyu force. And Ethan, blessed with Kryptonian lungs, could theoretically hold his breath forever. To him, that would be the ultimate broken ability, an infinite time stop. "It's ridiculous to think I'd get a bugged-out superpower like that," he muttered, folding his arms as he waited for the Namekian dragon's verdict. He'd prepared a fallback plan. If this wish failed, he'd ask for frozen demon genes or some other rare DNA to build an army of artificial metahumans. But still, he couldn't shake the hope. Then the light dimmed. The dragon had granted his wish. Ethan's pupils contracted. "No way! Is this for real?" He drew in a deep, deliberate breath, and the world went silent. Birds in mid-song froze, a breeze halted in mid-whirl, even the flicker of a nearby street lamp stood motionless. Time itself had answered his command. Ethan's heart thundered in triumph. He'd always joked that anime had warped his sense of reality, but now, for the first time, life had quite literally become just like the cartoons. Chapter 1: Reckoning with Time. Ethan had inherited a remarkable gift from Gudu's comic incarnation, the power to freeze time the instant he willed it. But this miracle came at a steep price. Each second he held the world motionless drained his own life force, and the longer he maintained the freeze, the more brutally his energy expenditure skyrocketed. The drain wasn't linear, it was exponential. 1 second of stop time cost Ethan a single unit of energy. 2 seconds demanded 10 units. 3 seconds devoured a full 100. Even with Doomsday's Kryptonian strength coursing through his veins and solar energy fueling every cell, Ethan simply couldn't afford to linger in a frozen moment. Yet he discovered a clever loophole. By briefly releasing the temporal lock and then snapping it back into place, he could chain multiple free Zest together. In effect, he could hold time captive almost indefinitely, so long as his reserves held out. After all, who but a Kryptonian with Doomsday's endurance could withstand that insane power output for more than a couple of seconds at a stretch? And as if stopping time weren't enough, Ethan awakened to a second, even more practical superpower: teleportation. All it took was a vivid mental image of his destination, be it a street corner halfway around the world or the rooftop of a distant skyscraper, and he would vanish from here only to reappear there in an instant. Between his temporal freezes and instantaneous leaps, Ethan had become a force untethered from the ordinary limits of space and time. Now, he stood ready to test the full extent of his astounding new abilities. Ethan's teleportation range was limited only by the strength of his own mental focus, much like the mutant abilities of Nightcrawler or Red Devil. He couldn't time travel, but he found his gift far more practical than any temporal power. Rather than immediately returning to Earth, Ethan chose to remain on Namek and master the local tongue. In the original timeline, the Grand Elder was teetering on the brink of death, his life force the linchpin that kept the Namekian Dragon Balls functional. Once he passed on, a new Elder would be appointed, and a fresh set of Dragon Balls forged. Thanks to his Kryptonian-level aptitude for learning, Ethan was conversing fluently with Neru within minutes. The young Namekian dragon kept glancing at him in surprised admiration. With several tissue samples from Neru safely stored, Ethan activated his teleportation and slipped back into Earth's atmosphere. Having instant travel at his disposal would make future errands far simpler, and he already had one in mind, paying a visit to Broly. Even if he never unlocked the legendary Super Saiyan gene, he decided that wouldn't stop him from hopping back over just to tease Broly, perhaps by sneaking up and giving that famous Saiyan tail a firm little tug. Ethan paced in the shadows, replaying his calculations. With Broly's current speed, he'd never uncover the truth, never track it down, unless he unlocked the power slumbering within him. And once that potential awoke, there'd be no holding him back. What would Broly think when he finally discovered the deception? A sudden thought struck Ethan. I'm short a powerful ally, he mused. If I quietly eliminate Broly's father and then present myself as Broly's big brother, would Broly pledge his loyalty to me? He pictured the battlefield of tomorrow. Frieza's vast army arrayed before him, and at his side stood Broly, growing stronger by the day, followed by an army of artificial warriors, each a blend of Saiyan, Namekian, and Earthling genes. With that force backing him, Ethan could crush Frieza without lifting a finger. Yet the bigger challenge loomed, controlling Broly himself. He stopped in his tracks. On the surface, Broly appeared spoiled by his aging father, but beneath that facade lay a fiercely loyal son. Broly's father, terrified of his own child's overwhelming strength, had honed him into a living weapon, Ethan's perfect excuse for reclaiming planet Vegeta and seizing the throne. But this Broly wasn't the berserker of legend. He was fundamentally kind, even capable of friendship with monsters. That compassionate streak made him unpredictable and dangerously difficult to manipulate. Leaning against the cold stone wall, Ethan's mind churned. He craved the power Broly could bring him, but molding such a gentle giant into his enforcer would require far more cunning than a simple assassination plot. And that uncertainty, that was the true risk. Is Ethan a good man? By most people's standards, he wouldn't qualify. He simply measured his actions against society's definition of good, shaped by the conventional morality he'd absorbed in his former life. He wasn't so arrogant as to believe that being a native of his homeland granted him carte blanche to do as he pleased. At his core, Ethan refused to slaughter innocents for sport, but he also felt no compunction about eliminating evildoers when it suited him. To him, dispensing that kind of justice was as much a matter of moral satisfaction as it was of self-preservation. If he ever came into conflict with Broly, Ethan knew resistance would be inevitable. He pondered the possibilities: spiritual magic, mind control. There had to be a way to keep Broly in check. Not the brute, soul-enslaving control tactics of Babidi, but something more subtle, an assurance that Broly could never be turned against him by rival mages or superpowered foes. It's settled, he decided. First, build the androids. Then I'll go retrieve Broly. With his plan firmly in place, Ethan steered his ship back toward Earth, already forecasting the challenges and the concessions his newfound alliance would demand. I'd be happy to help polish and rewrite the chapter. Could you please paste the full chapter text here so I can work on making it flow naturally in idiomatic English? Once I have the actual content, I'll rename Luther to Ethan, ensure he's portrayed as male, and deliver a coherent, readable draft. Chapter 36. I'm here to find my brother. Ethan had long been fascinated by the extraordinary potential hidden within Saiyan-Earthling hybrids, so when he began engineering his next generation of androids, he made sure to splice in their genes. He didn't stop there. Namekian DNA, renowned for its prodigious regenerative powers, also found its way into his design. With that ability, even a battle-ravaged cell could recover fully from near death without having to absorb Android 18, and in the process evolve into a lightning cell form rivaling Super Saiyan 2. Ethan was eager to see how much stronger his creations could grow. After all, when a Saiyan on the brink of death survives, every fiber of their being awakens with new strength, an almost limitless surge of power. Naturally, he'd built in safeguards to prevent runaway mutations. Even a marvel of bioengineering must abide by nature's upper limits, or risk unleashing an unstoppable force. When it came to aesthetics, Ethan resisted the temptation to give his androids an overtly alien look. Instead, they retained entirely human appearances, an intentional choice to disguise their true origins. Once all the trial data were collected and the Saiyan and Namekian genes perfected, he planned to return to the Marvel Universe and scale up production on a truly unbeatable army. Successful. From now on, you're android number 1. Ethan watched the final diagnostics scroll by on his console. He had always considered his earlier models more machine than man, advanced automata perhaps, but not true androids. These new creations, by contrast, were genuine super androids, every fiber of their being composed of perfectly engineered biological tissue. He'd opted not to install the infinite energy furnace. Using such a power source for raw muscle and bone struck him as wasteful. Yet even without it, android number 1 possessed breathtaking strength. Standing before him was a towering figure, 2 meters tall, bald and impassive. Ripped muscles strained beneath pale, unblemished skin, and the bold numeral 01 was emblazoned on his skull. To maintain uniformity across his forces, Ethan decreed that all future units would be hairless. Only elite cadres would carry the privilege of a full head of hair. Ethan had already field-tested android number 1 against the Imperial Organization's best machines. They didn't stand a chance. Old generation androids were quickly dispatched, overwhelmed by sheer power and reflex speed. Satisfied with the results, Ethan shifted his attention to the next challenge, devising a combat power detector capable of quantifying each unit's prowess. But he soon encountered a problem. Although he possessed vast technical knowledge, he lacked the formal training and mindset of a dedicated researcher. Without a clear path forward, he found himself stalled. In fact, every major breakthrough in this android program had originated from Dr. Yamada's pioneering research, an innovation Ethan could emulate but not yet transcend. Ethan had built on Gro's pioneering android research to create something entirely new. He raised his fist and with a thunderous bang sent his test subject, an android designated number 1, crashing to the ground in pieces. This was exactly what Ethan intended. He wanted to know whether, by pushing the Namekian-derived android to the brink of destruction and then letting it recover, the android would emerge stronger than before. After a tense few minutes, number 1 reassembled itself and staggered to its feet. Ethan immediately felt the shift in its ki. The android's aura was markedly more intense. "It worked," Ethan murmured, a broad grin spreading across his face. But the regeneration process still drains massive amounts of stamina and energy. It wouldn't be feasible to repeat this resurrection trick too often in quick succession. He paused to consider the implications. If his entire army of androids could regenerate like this, even just a few times, how unstoppable would they become? And since Gro had spliced in Saiyan DNA, there was another tantalizing possibility. If any of these androids ever tapped into a Super Saiyan transformation, would they sprout golden hair? Or would their metallic bodies glimmer with some new, luminous sheen? Ethan shook his head, shelving the question for later. Even with Gro's breakthroughs, androids, like all fighters, had limits. Potential could be enhanced, but it would never be truly infinite. With that sobering thought in mind, he turned back to the inert form of number 1, already planning his next experiment. Chapter 8. Seeds of Rebellion. Ethan watched the data scrolling across his screen, brow furrowed. It was widely known that only a handful of androids ever reached the so-called critical threshold without extraordinary circumstances. The only exceptions were prodigies like Goten and Trunks, who unlocked Super Saiyan power in childhood. Beyond those rare cases, why had their creator spliced Earthling DNA into the project at all? Clearly, he'd been gambling for a genetic jackpot, a Super Saiyan android with 50 times the normal fighting power. That explained Ethan's next move. He would manipulate Broly's loyalty, drawing him away from his father's iron grip. With Broly as an unwitting pawn, Ethan could truly test the limits of his hybrid design. Planet Vampa's twin suns dipped toward the horizon as Ethan's patrol ship descended, settling just beyond the rust-red dunes. He stepped onto familiar, crackling ground and slipped through the underbrush toward the cavernous hot spring. Steam curled into the cooling air, and there, half submerged in the mineral-rich waters, Broly bathed with his hulking companion, the gray-scaled monster Baya. Ethan paused behind a jutting boulder. Memories of past encounters with Broly, his raw strength, his guileless heart, filled him with both pragmatism and pity. Before he could intervene, a new figure strode into the steam. Paragus, Broly's father. The older man's stern gaze flicked to Baya. "We don't need extra mouths to feed," Paragus growled, voice cold as obsidian. "That beast can't be trained. It's worthless. I'll kill it tonight." Broly's face twisted in horror, but he made no move. He dared not defy his father. Paragus's mastery of hidden potential was infamous. A single warning demonstration could shatter him. Ethan clenched his fist. He could stop this now, save Baya, yet he held his peace. This was exactly the moment he'd been waiting for, the fracture in Broly's world. Soon Broly's faith in Paragus would crumble, and Ethan would step in as the only one who truly understood his potential. Paragus nodded grimly and turned away, leaving Broly motionless in the steaming pool. Ethan slipped from his hiding place, footsteps silent on the rocky soil. Broly looked up, confusion and anguish warring in his green-flecked eyes. He had never seen Ethan show anything but strategic concern. Ethan crouched beside him, voice low and soothing. "Look at me, Broly. What is that expression on your face? What are those tears for?" Broly swallowed, shoulders shuddering as the first drops fell. The moment of doubt had come. In that shattering instant, a spark of rebellion flickered in his heart, one that would change everything. Chapter title: Can Your Tears Defeat King Vegeta? A storm of dust swirled across Vampa's cracked surface as Paragus wiped the last trickle of blood from his blade. The great beast Baya lay dead in the scorched clearing, its colossal form sprawled beneath the jagged rocks. Paragus's stern gaze softened only for a moment as he looked down at his son Broly, who trembled behind him. "You must learn restraint, Broly," Paragus scolded, voice heavy with both pride and frustration. "Strength alone will not carry you through this world." Without another word, Paragus turned and strode off into the swirling red dusk. Broly watched him go, heart clenching with a mix of guilt and longing. But he never saw the pale figure that slipped silently into the shadows behind his father. Ethan moved like a wraith. Every step was measured, every breath held. He had watched Paragus's display of power and patience, had watched the father and son grow stronger generation after generation, and he had waited for the right moment. Now, as Paragus paused on a rocky ridge, Ethan struck. With a single devastating slice of his enchanted blade, he cleaved Paragus in two. The sound of tearing metal and flesh echoed through the canyon walls, and Ethan allowed himself a thin, grim smile before vanishing as swiftly as he had appeared. Broly's world exploded in agony. He dropped to his knees at the edge of the ridge, eyes wide with horror as crimson life seeped between his fingers. "Father!" he howled, voice breaking against the wind. Paragus collapsed beside him, his armor cracked and steaming. He tried to lift a hand to offer comfort, but Paragus's strength was gone. He managed only a faint whisper. "Broly, forgive me. I wanted revenge, for us, but the cycle must end." Before Broly could answer, a crackling surge of emerald energy ripped through the air. In a heartbeat, Ethan's magic detonated Paragus's body, reducing it to ash and scattering the father's final words into the dust. Broly's scream tore the sky apart, his vision blurred, his heartbeat thundered, and then, as if the planet itself responded, a massive aura of green light exploded from him. Rocks shattered, the ground heaved, and every gust of wind carried that raw, unbridled grief. "Who's there?" Broly bellowed, pounding his fists into the earth, searching for the phantom assassin. But Ethan had already slipped away, melding with the shadows, leaving no trace behind. Days passed in silence. Broly's torment transformed him, forging him into a tempest of rage, an untamed force even Vampa's harsh terrain struggled to contain. And Ethan watched from the darkness, every step calculated, every heartbeat distant. Then, on a night when the twin moons hung low and crimson in the sky, a fiery meteor streaked across the heavens. It crashed into Vampa with a deafening roar, shattering the silence and kicking up a pillar of smoke that rose like a dark omen. From that inferno emerged Ethan, cloaked in flames, his eyes glowing with determination. The hunt had only just begun. Broly appeared almost instantly, spotting a fiery orb slam into the earth. As the flames subsided, a lone figure stepped out of the smoldering crater. Ethan, emerging unscathed, had arrived inside a capsule car cleverly disguised as a fireball. Its atmospheric re-entry left no trace, and Broly, unfamiliar with such technology, could only stare. "Who are you?" Broly demanded, his voice low and cautious. Ethan gave a casual shrug. Me? I came to see my brother. Broly. You must be my brother, right? Brother? Broly echoed, bewildered. He'd never heard of an older sibling before. The very concept seemed foreign to him. You're my brother? Exactly, Ethan said, stepping forward with a friendly smile. I'm your older brother, Ethan. Broly's usual stoicism cracked. His eyes widened, and for the first time, a flicker of something like joy crossed his face. You're really here, Ethan, my brother. Chapter 37. Broly is tricked. Ethan stood before the frightened child, every inch the composed older brother. His dark eyes measured Broly's every reaction as he wove a subtle enchantment around the boy's mind, an illusion crafted to steer his memories and feelings. Where's your tail? Ethan asked, his voice calm but probing. Broly glanced down at his waist, fingers brushing where his tail should have been. It's broken, he said uncertainly. Ethan's expression remained impassive. Broken? Broly blinked, the word echoing in his mind. Could this calm stranger truly be his brother? But why didn't Father ever mention you? Father? Ethan's brow creased for a fraction of a second before he masked it. He had planned every detail of this story. He couldn't let Broly think their real father, Paragus, was still alive to spoil the deception. He needed a clean slate for both of them. You don't remember our father? Broly stiffened, suddenly on guard. What father? Our father. He's dead. Ethan froze only a heartbeat before adopting a serious tone. You really don't remember Paragus? The magic undercut Broly's defenses, tugging at his thoughts until he blurted, Paragus! Oh, that guy! Ethan's eyes flared with silent satisfaction. He let the spell deepen, cementing the false memories that would bind Broly to him and to the story they would share from this day on. Chapter 12. Shattered Allegiances. You will not insult Father. Broly bellowed, his massive frame straining against the swirling strands of magic that bound him. Ethan met his gaze steadily. Paragus isn't our father, Broly. You've been deceived. Broly's eyes widened, confusion flickering beneath his rage. The spell's influence urged him to reject Ethan's claim, but something in Ethan's tone sounded true. His clenched fists relaxed just enough for the glowing bonds to shudder. No, that can't be. Ethan took a cautious step forward. Listen to me. Paragus was never more than a fellow soldier under your real father's command. Saiyan task forces travel in small strike teams, elite warriors sent to conquer planets with high-value defenders. If the target world posed little threat, the Empire would dispatch child squads instead. But when a planet required overwhelming force, they sent every last warrior. Broly's brow furrowed. Ethan pressed on without hesitation. When you were born, your power level registered at 10,000, off the charts for any newborn. Paragus saw your potential and kidnapped you. He hid you away, raising you to become his personal weapon. His ultimate goal? To use you against King Vegeta, overthrow the throne, and claim all Saiyans for himself. Broly staggered as the magical chains fizzled out, collapsing to the floor in a heap of torn energy. His breathing was ragged, eyes wide with betrayal. He lied to me? All these years? Ethan knelt beside him, voice gentle. Yes, your true father would never have used you as a pawn. He would have fought by your side, not manipulated your life. Broly pushed himself to his feet, shoulders shaking. He met Ethan's gaze, a storm of anger and grief in his eyes. If Paragus ever crosses my path, he won't live to regret it. Ethan stood, offering a firm nod. Then let's end his scheme, and help you find your real place among the Saiyans. Broly's trembling fist closed around his own forearm as he drew a steadying breath. All right, together, we'll make him pay. Behind them, the remnants of Paragus's spell dissolved, leaving the two men standing side by side, once strangers, now allies bound by truth and a quest for justice. No one could have predicted Paragus's move, which is precisely why it worked. By the time anyone caught on, it was already too late. Broly stared at Ethan, his chest tight with disbelief. He wanted to believe his old master, but Paragus had never been a kind father. For years, Broly had accepted everything Paragus said, every harsh word, every punishment, because he'd thought it was for his own good. But now, with Ethan's revelations fresh in his mind, Broly realized how little common sense he'd ever really had. Without anyone guiding him besides Paragus's cruelty, he'd never learned the truths Ethan was telling him. Paragus had invested countless years trying to shape Broly, Yet Broly's power had always surged ahead on its own. In hindsight, all that effort had been pointless. It was so easy, Ethan had whispered, to steer him astray, and now planet Vegeta was gone for good. Is it all true? Broly asked, voice cracking. Ethan reached out and ruffled Broly's spiky hair. Of course it is, he said softly. You've had enough lies. Under Ethan's touch, Broly felt the last of his resistance weaken. Doubt still flickered in his eyes, but for the first time he wondered if, just maybe, Ethan was the one telling the truth. Ethan stood before Broly, tension crackling in the air. He'd already begun breaking down the Saiyan's stubborn defenses. Once Broly accepted him as his brother, everything would fall into place. So far, the plan was working better than Ethan dared hope. Taking a measured breath, Ethan's voice dropped to a solemn whisper. Broly, there's something you need to know. Planet Vegeta is gone. Broly's eyes widened. What did you say? He'd always heard King Paragus speak of Planet Vegeta, how he would one day overthrow King Vegeta and claim the throne of the Saiyan Empire. Broly himself had never set foot there. His home had always been the harsh world of Vampa. Challenging his father remained an unthinkable dream. Yet now, at the shock of hearing his ancestral world had been wiped out, Broly felt an inexplicable sense of relief. Ethan's jaw clenched. Our home was destroyed by Frieza, the Emperor of the Universe. Frieza? Broly repeated, his voice rough with confusion. Ethan nodded, then began to recount the terrible truth. How Frieza, paralyzed by rumors of a legendary Super Saiyan warrior, decided to eliminate the entire Saiyan race before any threat could emerge. Why would he do that? Broly asked, incredulous. Because he was afraid, Ethan said, locking eyes with him. Afraid of the Super Saiyan, afraid of your power. A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the world seemed to pause, as if awaiting Broly's next move, and the uncertain fate of two brothers bound by a shattered past. King Vegeta sealed his own fate the moment he cast infant Broly out to the barren world of Vampa. If the boy had survived, Frieza might have thought twice before obliterating Planet Vegeta and killing countless Saiyans alongside it. Ethan crouched before Broly, eyes alight with fervor. You've never heard of the Super Saiyan legend? He asked softly. Broly shook his head. Memories of home were a blur, fragmented by hunger and the howling winds of Vampa. Ethan leaned in, voice low but urgent. The Super Saiyan is born only once every 1,000 years. They awaken with a power level of 10,000, higher than King Vegeta at his peak. When you fully realize it, you'll be strong enough to restore our race as rulers of the universe. Broly's chest tightened. Me, a Super Saiyan? Ethan's grin was fierce. Yes, the one true Super Saiyan. He placed a firm hand on Broly's shoulder. Brother, together we'll avenge every Saiyan lost that day. Broly had heard his father Paragus outline grand schemes before, but they had always felt distant, words without warmth or urgency. Ethan's conviction struck a deeper chord, a burning promise. I understand. I will make them pay. To prove his words, Ethan produced a scouter, Paragus's own combat power detector, and fitted over Broly's ear. A flickering readout registered their power levels. Don't get overconfident, Ethan warned. Frieza's first form alone measures 530,000. Right now, you barely exceed 10,000. Broly stared at the numbers as a roar built in his chest. The gulf between him and his enemy was massive, but so was his resolve. The day he would unlock his Super Saiyan power was coming, and when it did, no force in the galaxy would stand in his way. If Ethan can get his hands on one, he shouldn't have any trouble building a far more powerful power-level detector. Or better yet, he could hand it over to Bulma and let her take it apart in her lab. Chapter 38. Fighting power soars. A thunderclap tore across the sky above planet Vampa, sending scores of ravenous beasts fleeing in fear. Ethan hovered in the void, watching as the monsters scattered. Not bad, Broly, he called out. His eyes locked on the young Saiyan opposite him. You've gotten a lot stronger. Broly, now fully grown into a tall, well-muscled young man, thanks to the legendary Super Saiyan's rapid growth spurt, beamed with pride. He raised his fist and shouted, Aniki, the Japanese word for older brother, his excitement lighting up his face. Since arriving on Vampa, Ethan had done nothing but look after Broly. Even though he insisted he was no longer a Saiyan, Broly's faith in him never wavered. Ethan hadn't brought Broly back to Earth, but he had made up for it. Monster meat feasts, fresh fruits, hearty stews, Whatever Broly craved, Ethan provided. It was easy to charm a Saiyan with good food, and Broly's gratitude had grown into genuine loyalty. After their last meal, sensing Broly's combat potential was ripe for testing, Ethan suggested a friendly spar. At first, Broly hesitated, worry creasing his brow. "What if I hurt you, Aniki?" Ethan laughed and patted his chest reassuringly. "Don't worry about me. Come on, we'll take it slow. Let's see how strong you really are." With that, he settled into a fighting stance, ready to push Broly to new heights. Ethan leaned back, a wry smile playing at his lips. Don't underestimate Broly. His base power may have been only 15,000 at first, but after the Great Elder's intervention, he's already broken past 42,000. You can't one-shot him anymore. He stood and began pacing. That's exactly why I insisted on more training. We still have a far greater threat on the horizon. Frieza's power level is over 530,000. Broly will need every last bit of strength we can forge if he's going to stand a chance. Broly shifted uneasily, but nodded his agreement. Ethan wasn't courting death. He simply needed real-world data on the Kryptonian doomsday hybrid he'd been studying. He'd considered striking Broly immediately, but the risk was too great. Broly's instant power-ups could have ended the experiment, and Ethan, in seconds. Instead, he devised a two-pronged approach. Broly would train under his supervision as both a top-tier fighter and a living test subject. That way, even if Broly eventually outclassed him, Ethan would still live to analyze the results. The trial began. Broly's form remained human, no giant ape transformation yet, but his power skyrocketed to over 80,000. In their sparring match, Ethan held his own for only a few seconds before he was genuinely taken aback. Thankfully, the Kryptonian doomsday research had paid off. His model proved every bit as formidable as predicted, vindicating years of meticulous study. As Broly caught his breath, Ethan knew they were one step closer to facing the real menace, Frieza. Ethan's doomsday gene alone could never have kept pace with Broly's ferocious rate of power-ups. Yet, as the Kryptonian bathed in the sun's rays, drawing in energy to recharge his battered body, the doomsday mutation surged forward in an instant, its evolution nearly matching that of the original doomsday. Broly let out a primal roar and launched himself at Ethan. Though fiercely loyal and straightforward by nature, Ethan carried the warrior spirit of the Saiyans in his blood. At first, his reluctance to fight had held him back, but after exchanging blows with Broly on equal footing, his restraint crumbled. Ethan squared his shoulders and threw a mighty punch in return. When their fists met, the collision rocked the air itself. A spherical void opened at the point of impact, and the expelled atmosphere blasted outward as a shock wave with tens of millions of tons of force. Every cubic centimeter of that wave bore more than 100 million tons of pressure, enough to turn anything in its path to dust. There was nothing in the sky or on the ground capable of withstanding such devastation. Caught in the aftermath, the two combatants hovered in the Hia, center of a vast cratered wasteland. Silence reigned for a heartbeat, until the distant rubble began to tremble once more, heralding the next stage of their cataclysmic duel. Ethan reeled as Broly's fist thundered into him. He could feel his cells ripping apart under the impact. In an instant, though, the doomsday gene within him surged into action, knitting torn tissue back together and flooding him with even greater power. With virtually limitless strength and boundless stamina, Ethan had only one thought: strike back with everything he had. He rocketed forward and met Broly's next blow head-on, their fists colliding in a shockwave of raw force. Broly's dark hair whipped wildly around his head as he snarled, but Ethan's punch landed squarely on the Saiyan's cheek. Even against Broly's near-indestructible physique, the strike left a red welt. Broly bellowed in rage and countered with a brutal salvo that sent Ethan hurtling hundreds of meters away. Ethan crashed into the rocky earth, tasting blood as his split lip throbbed. Broly advanced, muscles bulging. "Come on," the Saiyan taunted. "Show me what you've got." Pain shot through Ethan's chest where Broly's blow had shattered his biological force field, metallic skin overlay, and chi enhancement circuits. Yet beneath the agony, he felt a surge of power. His next punch cracked the ground harder than before. Gritting his teeth, he sprang to his feet and launched himself at Broly again, fists blazing. Again and again they traded blows, each strike intensifying the other's power in a strange feedback loop. Blow by blow, they drove each other past known limits, until Ethan caught a flicker of something in Broly's eyes, an unhinged fury, a primal madness. He paused. This wasn't the legendary Doomsday, and neither knew whether their rampage had any bounds. Better to stay sharp and not test their limits carelessly. After all, this was only a facsimile of destruction, and Ethan still had no idea just how far either of them could go. Ethan's heart pounded. If Broly lost control again, he might kill his opponent in a single, uncontrollable rage. Summoning every ounce of command, Ethan shouted, "Stop!" Almost instinctively, Broly halted mid-assault. His golden aura flickered, then receded as clarity returned to his eyes. He staggered back, breathing hard, and gasped, "Brother, I feel so much stronger." He looked down at his clenched fists, awed by the raw power coursing through him. Before Broly could risk another outburst, Ethan dug a specially modified combat power scouter from his belt. In the old Dragon Ball days, these devices shattered once power levels soared past their limits. Ethan's prototype, however, was built to withstand any surge. He adjusted the dial and tapped the reading into focus. "Your power level right now is 500,000, Ethan announced, his voice steady despite the thrill of discovery. He allowed himself a light sigh. 500,000, even casually, Broly had reached the legendary Super Saiyan threshold. No wonder so many warriors had broken down at the mere thought. Ethan kept a careful watch, determined never to let Broly lose himself completely. In a full-blown great ape transformation, his growth would skyrocket even faster, far beyond control. Ethan himself stood at 550,000 and climbing. His own scouter offered greater precision, compensating for the skillful aura concealment techniques he'd mastered. For now, though, both brothers stood on a precipice of power greater than any Saiyan legend, and Ethan intended to guide Broly's strength, rather than let it guide them both into oblivion. Chapter 7. The Ultimate Scouter. Hiding their true power had misled countless members of Frieza's Legion, so Ethan spared no effort in enlisting Bulma's genius. Together, they developed an advanced scouter far superior to any existing model. Instead of merely measuring raw ki, this device analyzes body density and tissue strength, ensuring every fighter's rating is a fair reflection of their true capabilities. After all, even covertly stored energy subtly enhances the physique, except, of course, for Super Saiyan God Blue's divine ki, which operates on such a microscopic plane that it leaves no detectable trace. In those cases, the scouter remains silent, but the strength is no less formidable. When the upgraded scouter finally calibrated, the results were unmistakable. A Kryptonian's 500,000 power level utterly outclassed a Saiyan or Frost Demon with the same nominal score. And that wasn't all. Ethan himself had been delving into arcane magic, adding a formidable mystical edge to his already impressive arsenal. The combination of cutting-edge technology and newfound sorcery had elevated his strength beyond anything he or his peers had ever imagined. To solidify his alliance with Broly, Ethan had arranged for a group of artificial humans from Earth's Imperial Research Institute to move in with the legendary Saiyan. Their sole purpose, to cook, clean, and keep Broly content in his remote mountain stronghold. Satisfied with every detail, from the scouter's flawless readings to the provisions for Broly's comfort, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of pride. "With power like this," he whispered, watching the scouter's display glow steadily in his hand, "I could stand toe-to-toe with anyone in the Marvel Universe." And as a confident grin spread across his face, he knew he had all the tools he needed to reshape the galaxy. "Hi there. Could you please provide the full chapter text that you'd like me to revise? Once I have the complete chapter, I'll rewrite it into coherent, idiomatic English, renaming the main character to Ethan and ensuring he's consistently male." Chapter 39. New Man-Made Human. Ethan sat across from Broly in the dimly lit chamber. Broly's legs still throbbed where he'd been wounded, courtesy of Frieza's ambush, and his green eyes burned with a mixture of pain and longing for vengeance. "Brother," Broly began, his voice low and urgent, "can we go after Frieza now? It's time we got our revenge, right?" Ethan studied him carefully. In the days since that betrayal, Broly had been under the subtle sway of Ethan's magic and silver-tongued assurances. The simple-minded Saiyan believed every word, but Ethan knew how precarious it was. If word got out that a Kryptonian was manipulating a Saiyan, both their lives would be forfeit. "Not yet, Broly," Ethan said, leaning forward, his expression grave. "Frieza isn't as predictable as you think. His combat power, the 530,000 he's been flaunting, that's not his true limit. He's hiding his real strength." Broly's jaw dropped. He had pinned all his hopes on his own 500,000 power, combined with his brother's 550,000. He imagined crushing Frieza once and for all, avenging their fallen clan. Now he realized Frieza was holding back even more. Broly clenched his fist, a cold dread settling over him. If Frieza could conceal his true power, what chance did they really have? Ethan studied Broly with a thoughtful expression. Frieza's hidden strength is unbelievable. He actually restricts himself because his raw power would destroy his own body. He's sealed his energy behind several limiters. In his first form, his power level tops out at 1 million. In the second, it jumps to several million. And in his final stage, he starts in the tens of millions, and with no restraints, he can surge all the way to 100 million. Broly stared at Ethan, jaw-dropping. 100 million? The number was so vast it might as well have been infinite. Broly could barely count past 100. He had no frame of reference for a figure that huge. He thought about the battles ahead, about the pain and loss he'd suffered, and a fierce determination gleamed in his eyes. "Then train me," he growled. "I want to be strong enough. One day, Frieza will pay for what he did." Ethan nodded and led Broly toward a reinforced training bay. "I've rebuilt the gravity chamber just for you. If ordinary Saiyans can use it to boost their strength, then as the legendary Super Saiyan, you'll benefit even more. It's the most reliable way to raise your combat power steadily. From here on out, every second you spend in there brings you closer to that day of reckoning." Inside the chamber, the gravity dial loomed like a silent promise. Broly clenched his fists, ready to push his limits beyond anything he'd ever known, until Frieza's reign of terror was nothing but a distant memory. Ethan stared at the data scroll on his desk, wondering if he'd ever meet Broly again, especially now that the Saiyan's power level had reportedly climbed to a staggering 100 million. Since Broly's last rampage, Ethan had made a trip to Namek, gathered the Dragon Balls, and tried once more to wish for a seamless integration of Broly's DNA. To his frustration, the wish fizzled. He rubbed his temples. Namek's Shenron simply can't manipulate something as intricate as Broly's genome. It's beyond that dragon's power. Leaning back, he surveyed the shelves lined with vials and canisters. "Fortunately, I've already amassed genetic samples from every known species in the Dragon Ball universe. Saiyans, Namekians, Frieza's soldiers, androids, you name it. There might be a few gaps here and there, but no one else could ever compile a collection this exhaustive. This library alone gives me everything I need." Within hours, Ethan had outlined a new plan. He hadn't brought Broly back to Earth because Broly's unpredictable nature, magical control, or no, posed too grave a risk. His solution was elegant in its simplicity. Build a perfect Broly in the lab. An artificial Saiyan android designed from the embryonic stage and infused with Broly's genetic code. Drawing on Dr. Gero's cultivation techniques, the same method once used to develop early prototypes like Shalu, he set up the embryo incubators. Already, the experiment was surpassing his expectations. If all went well, he'd soon have his very own Broly, stronger, more controllable, and utterly loyal. Ethan didn't delegate the project to the lab's computer systems. From the very first moment of conception, he guided and regulated the embryo with his own arcane techniques. Now, a full year later, the clone had matured into a young man. Broly's raw power, woven into his genetic code, blended seamlessly with the warrior stamina of Namekian blood. The result was extraordinary vitality. Though clones are known for their truncated lifespans, they grow at an astonishing rate. Ethan regarded the artificial warrior standing before him, satisfaction warming his chest. Every aspect of his appearance had been meticulously refined to distinguish him from Broly. "I could give you a sterile serial number," Ethan said with a half-smile, "but Saiyans prefer vegetable names. From now on, you're Cucumber." True to Saiyan tradition, most names come from vegetables, often using the Japanese word, sometimes French or English. In Japanese, cucumber is Kyuri, but Ethan chose the plain English term. It might sound odd at first, but for him there was no better fit than cucumber. Ethan surveyed his silent companion with a wry smile. "I call you Cuke because you're obsessed with cucumbers," he said. It was an odd nickname, but Cuke didn't react. His memories and very consciousness had been written by Ethan, ensuring absolute obedience. Yet beneath that placid exterior burned the spirit of a legendary Super Saiyan, ferociously aggressive and relentless in battle, though far easier to control than Broly. Today, Ethan planned to bring Kyuke into the Marvel Universe. He'd already cranked the Namekian's power to unprecedented levels, forcing the dimensional rift to widen in response. Even if the corridor grew too narrow and Kyuke's body were momentarily crushed, his Namekian cells would regenerate him. "All set?" Ethan asked, checking the shimmering portal before them. This was his first attempt at carrying a living being through time and space, and he didn't know if the gateway could handle the strain. Ordinary mortals would be torn apart by the temporal energies, so only the toughest could survive the journey. Sure enough, as the rift pulsed and expanded, Ethan slipped into his Mario transformation, a specialized form he'd devised to stabilize the unstable energies. Cuke flinched as the corridor's energies washed over him, but before discomfort could register on his face, Ethan grasped his arm. With a final nod, they plunged into the glowing maw of the portal. In an instant, both were gone, swept away into the heart of the Marvel cosmos. Cuke's expression never changed, but the world around them shifted, promising challenges neither had ever faced before. Ethan blinked and thought, "Why do I suddenly feel like Mario?" He shrugged off the odd comparison when he saw the cucumber, his makeshift power-up, still perfectly intact. Relieved, he turned to Qinghua, the green-skinned guardian he'd brought along. "You're in charge of this place from now on," he said. His top priority was the secret underground command center hidden beneath the Imperial building. With rumors of a Chitauri invasion and other looming threats to New York, Ethan had used one of his Dragon Ball wishes to summon the toughest metal in the universe, Thundersteel. Palunga had delivered it, though not the ultra-durable variant later forged during the Tournament of Power, which was on another level entirely. This Thundersteel was still more than strong enough to reinforce the base's walls. Between the metal's resilience and the legendary Super Saiyan warrior stationed at the entrance, Ethan was confident no unwanted guest would ever breach his defenses. But Palunga had only granted a small quantity of Thundersteel, so Ethan planned to study its atomic structure himself. If he could reverse engineer the alloy with an atomic rearranger or molecular aggregator, he'd have endless material to fortify his underground stronghold and safeguard the city above. But whichever option Ethan chose, it wouldn't be easy to secure. Qinghua simply nodded and said, "Understood," making it clear he'd grasped the situation. Chapter 40, Shifting Tides. Ethan stared in disbelief as headline after headline splashed across his tablet, Stark Industries' latest masterpiece unveiled. Ministry of Defense moves to acquire Jericho missiles. Playboy billionaire, genius inventor, or top arms dealer. Jericho missile? That name should have been buried in classified files, known only to Stark's inner circle and select military brass. In the original timeline, Tony Stark had refined the Jericho as a covert prototype, flown straight to Afghanistan for a guarded demonstration with General Vip. No public announcements, no global fanfare. If the world already knows about it, the entire chain of events that forced Stark into hostile territory, ambush, captivity, and ultimately the birth of Iron Man, is erased. There would be no secret convoy, no roadside attack, no desperate armored escape. Everything that follows hinges on that clandestine mission. Ethan tapped the screen, a slow smile curling on his lips. Was this leak a reckless decision by Stark himself, or a calculated move from Washington? Either way, the story was about to take an unexpected turn, and he couldn't wait to see where it led. They probably assumed Ethan would simply fly off, invulnerable, untouchable, and impossible to pin down, so they even resorted to missile deterrence. That's classic behavior from America's top brass, or really anyone in power. If you can't beat it, you intimidate it. And honestly, most of the world thinks that way. After all, the public barely raised an eyebrow at the super soldiers and Captain America engineered by Compound Number 1. But Ethan's arrival has blown every expectation and our very sense of reality out of the water. He shot into the sky, leaving Earth far behind. No weapon could harm him. His strength seemed boundless, and his speed rivaled lightning itself. Those are the kind of powers that dazzle audiences on screen, but in real life, they inspire nothing but terror. The first reaction might be cheers, but those quickly give way to cold panic. If Ethan wields that level of power and ever decides you're his enemy, what's stopping him from ending you in an instant? Even worse, there's no one and nothing capable of intercepting him. The footage of Ethan dismantling that band of armed thugs has been dissected by military analysts, weapons experts, and scientific researchers worldwide. Their consensus? Even a tank would be helpless against him unless an entire armored division, or better yet, an airstrike was deployed. Yet Ethan can fly, and his speed alone makes conventional forces nearly obsolete. His ability to snatch bullets from midair reveals nerve reflexes that move well beyond supersonic. In the wake of Ethan's spectacular display, Tony Stark was quietly summoned to a top-secret meeting with the Department of Defense and senior military officials. Their request was simple in intent, but devilishly complex in execution. Develop weapons capable of neutralizing Ethan, the so-called Superman. Stark, already uneasy about Ethan's unchecked powers, found their mandate both intellectually daunting and morally unsettling. In his gut, he worried that someone this powerful, untethered by any oversight, posed a real threat to public safety and global stability. Meanwhile, Ethan had activated his super hearing. With every stray radio broadcast and idle gossip picked up by his enhanced ears, and every scrap of data fed to him by Megatron, Stark's advanced artificial intelligence system, the world's opinion became unmistakably clear. People were demanding that Ethan's abilities be regulated, that he surrender his technology to their governments. Notably, the corporate magnates who stood to profit from such innovations remained conspicuously silent. Now, as whispers of control measures and weaponized countermeasures gained traction, Ethan found himself facing not just villains in dark alleyways, but entire institutions determined to clip his wings. And Tony Stark, torn between scientific fascination, personal unease, and patriotic duty, braced himself for the chala, nay of containing or possibly confronting the most extraordinary human being either of them had ever encountered. Ethan sat back in his leather armchair, eyes narrowed as he surveyed the holographic briefing glowing before him. They may be greedy, he said, but even they recognize one inviolable rule. Private ownership is sacrosanct. If they could just seize anyone's assets at will, first mine, then yours, then what use would America be? Its politicians would be nothing more than lapdogs, its president a mere valet. Let some upstart try to exploit U.S. power to confiscate their holdings, and they'd dissolve the country in an instant. Sure, they lust after superhuman abilities, but they draw the line at losing control of their own property. He waved a hand with contempt. Pushing propaganda is dull. I prefer real warfare. Corporate black ops, targeted eliminations, none of this Sadovos backstabbing. At his command console, the artificial intelligence Megatron's avatar flickered to life. Sir, we've logged 19,345 cyber attacks against our networks in the past 24 hours. Of those, 1,540 were classified as high intensity, enough to crash over 50% of our critical systems. Ethan's jaw tightened. Do you have their source locations? Working on it, Megatron replied. I'm tracing every packet, pinging every proxy. I'll have a physical address soon. In the digital realm, super advanced AIs like Megatron are almost unstoppable, but not in this corner of the Marvel universe. Sky of the Rising Tide organization has developed formidable countermeasures, and Dr. Caldwell isn't far behind. Their work keeps the balance of power in the shadows, shaping every data breach and firewall encounter. Zola's voice chimed softly through the secure channel in Ethan's office. We've traced 97% of the intrusion points back to their true IP addresses. Ethan leaned forward, studying the data cascade on his holoscreen. Hydra's AI node, Zola, was the cutting edge of their counterintelligence network, but it was Megatron, the core artificial intelligence, that had finally begun to outpace even the most skilled hackers. Ordinary cybercriminals had nowhere left to hide. The Rising Tide organization's operatives, once ghosts in the machine, were now fully exposed. Every last target was locked in the grid via real-time surveillance. "There's no need for me to lead this op in person," Ethan said. "Deploy the Imperial Company's mercenary unit instead." For months, Ethan had been scrambling to assemble a crack team of specialists, especially skilled hackers and field techs. Now he could leverage the Imperial Company's elite operators. Bound by lifetime contracts and regularly dosed with the company's experimental superhuman serum, these mercenaries were the organization's tip of the spear. This mission would be their first real test, and their eagerness was palpable. Ethan keyed in new orders. Within minutes, each mercenary would receive mission briefs, encrypted comm channels, and travel clearance. The Imperial Company's corporate welfare package was legendary: hefty retention bonuses, health augmentation therapy, and full legal protection. Money, and promises of more, had always been a powerful motivator, and many of these operatives had backgrounds in U.S. Special Forces or private military contracting. He allowed himself a rare, tight smile. He'd never seen a more motivated workforce. As soon as they hit the field, he'd have hard proof of just how swiftly Megatron and Zola could turn the tide. Now, with targets identified and resources in motion, Ethan finally felt in control. The hunt was on, and this time they would not fail. Ethan stood among the assembled fighters, seasoned mercenaries in dusty combat jackets and uniformed U.S. soldiers fresh from active duty. Emperor Company had deliberately paired the two groups for its latest mission. The brass knew full well the tension it would stir. Mercenaries, hardened by countless firefights, viewed the American troops as pampered professionals more concerned with per-die checks than actual combat. The soldiers, in turn, distrusted the soldiers of fortune, labeling them undisciplined and reckless. Yet both sides shared one thing: a reputation for efficiency. Mercenaries survived where armies faltered, earning their pay and their scars on some of the world's bloodiest battlefields. The U.S. soldiers boasted state-of-the-art training and logistics support that kept them standing when others fell. Now, both would serve under the same flag and answer to the same orders. Inside the company's briefing room, Colonel Marcus Reyes tapped the holographic display. "Our target is a hacker cell that penetrated Emperor Company's network last month. They're not heavily armed, but they've proven elusive. Intel suggests their main base is hidden in an abandoned textile mill on the outskirts of the city." He paused, letting the room absorb the news. Capturing each hacker alive carries a $1 million bounty. The sum will be divided equally among everyone who brings in a confirmed target. A murmur rippled through the mercenary contingent. On the far side, Staff Sergeant Cole McAllister of the 7th Infantry Battalion straightened his uniform jacket. "So we're getting paid to snatch some code monkeys?" He looked around with thinly veiled contempt. "Don't let these corporate soldiers outflank us. Remember, we're trained professionals." From the mercenary ranks came a rasping laugh. A wiry man with a jagged scar across his cheek, known only as Roach, stepped forward. "Professional, huh? You boys only volunteer for the shiny days. We endure the real hell, day in, day out. We'll see who's more professional when the smoke settles." Ethan watched the back and forth with cool detachment. He'd trained alongside both kinds of fighters in previous engagements, and he knew each side was right and wrong. The hackers they were tracking specialized in data warfare, not direct assault. Capturing them alive would require equal parts stealth and firepower, a challenge that demanded unity, not division. Colonel Reyes raised his voice. "Enough. This operation will require tight coordination. Your first task is insertion under cover of darkness. Recon teams go in by drone 3 hours before H hour. Patience and precision are key." He swept his gaze across the room. "We can't afford mistakes, and we sure as hell can't afford infighting. Dismissed." Uniforms rustled as soldiers and mercenaries stood, half-heartedly nodding or eyeing each other warily. Ethan slipped out of the room, heart pounding with anticipation. Tonight's raid would test every skill he had, and every compact he'd ever made with a comrade, regardless of their uniform. As he donned his night vision goggles and checked his rifle suppressor, he reminded himself of the stakes: $1 million, and the company's trust hung in the balance. The hacktivists might be weak on the battlefield, but outsmarting them would demand nothing less than absolute teamwork. And for once, he hoped the mercenaries and the soldiers could honor their paychecks with performance. "It looks like you've only provided a brief snippet. Could you please share the full chapter text that you'd like me to revise? Once I have the complete passage, I can rewrite it into smooth, idiomatic English, renaming the main character Luther to Ethan and ensuring he's clearly male, while preserving all key plot points and details.